I think we're all here. I'll call the meeting to order. Commissioner Atkinson, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for being here today, and welcome to, I think this is the third budget workshop on March 27th. Real quick housekeeping issue. I had a request that this be a 4-hour meeting today. I think that sounds reasonable, so I'll ask for the pleasure of the board. Is it?
Motion, yeah.
Oh,
Do we
okay.
need to vote on that?
I don't think we need to vote on it. I think we just need to agree that we're going to have a time certain, 5 o'clock today. I know there's some other events this evening, which means realistically we'll probably have another budget workshop. I don't think anybody's kidding themselves with the number on here that we're going to. It's a nice idea. It's lovely, but I don't think that's going to happen. So with that, I'm going to yield to Frank for a quick thing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we get into the budget presentations, I know it's a significant concern to everyone on the board, what's happening with the Rockledge Hospital situation. And so I've asked the chief to come up just to give you an update in terms of what some of the efforts are that they are working on to try to help address that situation as it moves forward.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So as we all know, no secret, Orlando Health Rockledge a few weeks ago came to us and let us know that they were going to be closing that hospital down. So since then, we've engaged in many meetings during the week with hospital leadership, just our local partners, and working on our plan forward to still support the community. Starting this week, we have partnered with Coastal Ambulance Service in Brevard County to start working on the BLS. So those low acuity calls, say toothache, rash. I think one example from this week was somebody that was having trouble sleeping. So those calls we then transferred down to Coastal Ambulance Service. In 96 hours of service so far this week, they've done 6 transports. Now, mind you, 6 does not sound like a lot, but that is in a system that is still fully functional with all hospitals in place, with the trial happening in Merritt Island. So an area that does not have the significant call volume that we see in Cocoa and Rockledge area. But every one of those calls that we then transition down, we have a 5-team medical direction staff. So the doctor is called every time to consult on that and ensure that that is the right decision for the patient. And they are remaining on call 24/7, all hours through the night. Once that transitions, they'll be on 24-hour shifts. Right now, the trial's on 12. So next week, those 2 ambulances in Merritt Island will then go to 4. The third week of the trial, it'll transition to Cocoa and Rockledge, and the 5th ambulance will be in the Port St. John, Canaveral Groves area, and they will be a system status. What that means is they will go wherever they are needed. They will transition, they will fill in holes in the gaps, even if, say, that hole needs to slide North County, South County, they're not bound to one area for the coverage. I'm proud to say our men and women in Merritt Island right now are excited to have them as part of our fire response family. And even though system status is what Coastal Ambulance Service does, they have invited them into the firehouse to enjoy some meals and just get out of their rigs and get a little more comfortable in between the calls. So it's already worked out to be a great partnership between BCFR and Coastal Ambulance Service to still serve the community and respond to the things that are happening with Orlando Health. Any questions?
Thanks, Chief. Are there any questions for the Chief on that item specifically? Okay, thank you very much for that update. Okay,
we're going to start with Planning and Development, and Billy Prasad will be making that presentation.
You have 4 minutes, Billy. Okay.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to present the Planning and Development budget overview. Planning and Development is a large department with a large breadth of services provided, everything from zoning, code enforcement, subdivision planning, building code, and collection of impact fees. Few just representative by the numbers. We have about 2,500 code enforcement and contractor licensing cases annually, 3,900 development records, that includes site plan subdivisions. We process about 100 building permits every single day, 53,000 payment transactions annually. We register about 1,200 to 1,300 county licensed contractors, and we conduct 216 building inspections about every single day. Little teamwork by the numbers. We have about 77 employees currently. We have quite a few Lean Six Sigma initiatives. We've completed 7 projects as a department. 2 are active. ESF5 is, so we have 2 emergency support functions. ESF5 is a communications functions where we assist teams at the EOC during and after an event in organizing information for later distribution. The bulk of our employees do damage assessment. So after a storm, as soon as it's safe, we have teams of employees go out and canvass areas, whether they're county-wide or specific areas, depending on what the situation requires, and document damages through images and text, which allows our EOC to ensure our residents have access to the assistance and funding they deserve. So one more note about teamwork. Due to the large breadth and functions our department has, this does allow us to create synergies that increase our level of service at no additional cost. For example, there might be a code enforcement case that involves zoning, and because code enforcement and zoning are under one roof, those 2 teams work together to find a resolution to that problem for the residents and get voluntary compliance. Additionally, 5 other county department fees are collected through P&D that include public works, natural resources, utilities, solid waste, and fire rescue. Kind of quick 2025 overview for the 2025 budget. About $80 million of the $108 million of the P&D budget are impact fees. That's primarily a pass-through. That's not money that P&D is using itself. That's passing on either through other county agencies or outside agencies such as the school board or the various cities. If you take that $80 million out, what's left is about $28 million. And that's split up between the functions that P&D actually spends our time on day-to-day operations. That's building code, code enforcement, planning and zoning, licensing, regulation, and enforcement. Our budget overview slide, this takes out impact fees and balance forward for the reasons I just noted. So our revenue was about $10.6 million in fiscal year 24 versus expenses of about $9.5 million. The first program I'm going to focus on is impact fee trends. As you can see, the impact fee assessments dropped from 2023 to fiscal year 2024 from 5,400 to about 4,300, but that's after about a 3-year pretty consistent increase. Meanwhile, the total impact fees collected remained about flat. So like a lot of things that are involved with P&D, a lot is dependent on value and type of project, not so much just raw numbers, raw applications. So if you look at the impact fees collecting, excluding education, again, that number is pretty consistent over time. When you start getting into the individual funds, that's when you start seeing some more variability. So I know we've talked about this before, but I just want to briefly talk about impact fee revenue restrictions. The county must specifically earmark funds collected under the impact fees for use in acquiring, constructing, and improving capital facilities to benefit new users. That's language taken directly through statute. You can't use it for anything else. And specifically, you can't use it for repairs and maintenance. Here's some broader impact fee trends. The top shows unincorporated versus incorporated, including education. You can see that we collect far more total impact fees in incorporated areas, 25 million versus about 13 million. If you take out education, that number flips. Just for some context, for commercial, for projects, you don't collect educational impact fees. So when you start talking about specific funds, the correctional impact fees is maintained pretty consistent over time, at least over the past 5 years. The educational impact fees, and again, you'll see two funds on the one slide. Those cannot be intermixed, so what's collected in the north must stay in the north. What's collected in the south fund has to stay in the south fund. So the south fund stays consistently much lower. And in 24, it was about 5.7 million, whereas in the north, it's 17 million, which is a pretty precipitous drop over the previous year. The transportation impact fees, again, separate funds can't be intermixed. So, you know, if you have a spike like you had in 23 in South Mainland, it might have made sense. Central Mainland went down. You can't just flip that to make up for the difference. It's got to stay where it's collected. And so it kind of is what it is, and it can be a bit fickle. It's dependent on development trends. Library impact fees. And then EMS fire. The EMS is actually, we combined for the purpose of this slide 2 funds into one, just to give you an idea of overall collections. And as you can see, fire is pretty consistent, although there was a drop between 23 and 24. More importantly, it's just quite a low number. Meanwhile, the Vieira Station 48 expense, that's the dotted red line. That's actually, we put this on the slide, that's actually just to give you some information. That's money that's going out the door, essentially. So that's money that we're obligated based on the agreement with Vieira that built the fire station. Money collected in that specific area goes back to the Vieira. So that was $206,024. I realize this is a complex slide with a lot of information on it, but I wanted to give you an idea of what different types of units typically pay in impact fees. This slide is specifically for residential projects in unincorporated Brevard County. The rates in light green are the actual rates. That's the one thing on the slide that's just, it is what it is. That's single-family detached homes. So the rates you see there from left to right are exactly what you pay if you're building a home in unincorporated Brevard County. The ones below that, we did the best we can to group multifamily in a way that makes sense to kind of give you an idea of representative numbers for impact fees. So the kind of brownish orange look, that's for the smaller 1 or 2 story multifamily. And then the next one down is the 3 or more stories. And then in the yellow is the mobile home and RV rentals. So just to give you an idea of the variety of different rates people are paying through that broad spectrum of residential impacts. And the next slide, you can't even do that with the commercial because they range on so many different factors depending on use, square footage, et cetera. So really we can just take averages per impact fee fund. There was 23 total commercial business impact fee assessments in 24 for a total of about $3 million. Some history of impact fees, and I know you've seen most of this before. The impact fee was last raised in 2001. On January 28th, the board had directed staff to draft an RFP for a consultant to perform an impact fee study on the EMS and fire. Then in February, the board gave an option to broaden that. So we'll see what we get back. The RFP was advertised on March 14th, and proposals are due April 8th. So more information to come on that. The procedure for impact fees, we've talked about before, but there has been one update on the extraordinary route. If you recall, there's 2 primary routes to increase impact fees. The normal, which is 25% or less, has to be done in 2. Then between 25% and 50%, you do it in 4 increments. And then for an extraordinary increase, that allows you to go over 50%, or if the extraordinary need shows it, down to 1 year. But the key is there's been a bill filed in the legislature. Not, you know, who knows whether it'll pass or not at this point, but it better defines, or really defines, extraordinary need in a much more narrow way than it's been used in the past. So if that winds up, you know, getting to the governor's desk and he signs it, that's going to limit the board's options if it ever would have gone down that route to begin with. But even if you did, you'd have to expressly demonstrate an extraordinary need, have 2 public workshops, and an approval by a 2/3 vote. Next, I'm going to turn to the Florida Building Code program of our department. It's really kind of one of the meat and potatoes programs. The statewide Uniform Building Code is mandated by Florida law and administered by the Florida Building Commission. It's based on the international building codes with Florida-specific issues. You really can't go beyond that or outside of that. You can go a little bit, you You can go more strict in the Florida Building Code if you follow a very specific process, but generally all municipalities and counties must follow the Florida Building Code, which establishes minimum construction standards. So you'll see some building code trends here. Again, I talked before about, the raw numbers don't necessarily translate to revenue in the development world. The permit issued number has gone down quite a bit since 2019, where it was at 26,394, and now it's down to 23,429. But because of the job values have gone up, the revenue you can see in fiscal year 24 actually increased despite the lower amount of raw permits, because the permit job value is just as much drives the revenue we get in as the raw number of permits issued. Now, major construction permit trends, these are kind of new builds, so to speak, new homes, new businesses, a new footprint. Didn't want to use the term new construction because that's a very specific term in the budget world, but this just gives you an idea from our perspective and might give you an idea of what development is like and the development trends overall in unincorporated Brevard County. You can see it's remained pretty consistent between 23 and 24, from 1,100 down to 1,000. The average job value went up very significantly on the commercial side in 24. That's probably due to one project that's skewing it, or at least a couple projects, specifically the Merritt Island Health First Hospital. And you can see below that on the average construction fees, you did not see the correlation increase in revenue, and there's a very specific reason why. It has to do with a statutorily mandated reduction in permit fees for specific projects that I'll get to in a minute. So some building code revenue restrictions. The building code revenue is extremely restricted under Florida statute. It can be only used for carrying out the county's responsibilities and enforcing the Florida Building Code, period. Fees generally may not exceed actual cost. Aside from direct enforcement activities, and that's paying the employees that are actually doing the inspections, doing the plan reviews and things like that, funds can be used for the construction of building to house the building code enforcement activities or, quote, upgrade technology, hardware and software systems to enhance service delivery. And that technology language was just added in 2024, and that became very important for us for a reason I'll get to in a minute. So here are the building permitting review agencies. These are the agencies that are actually reviewing building permits. The top three are actually housed in P&D, have building, land development, and zoning. Other agencies touching various permits are fire rescue, natural resources, public works, utilities, and our impact fees. So what are they actually looking for? Well, they're looking for structural issues, foundation issues, mechanical issues, kind of things you'd expect, as well as very key life safety issues, accessibility, ADA compliance issues, and the most recent version of the Florida Building Code updated quite a few things having to do with energy efficiency, whether that's lighting and things with HVAC and of that nature. So I talked earlier about that statutory mandate, and I'm going to get to it in a second here. But so the Florida Statute 553.791 mandates a 25% reduction for inspection and or a 25% reduction in review fees when using private providers. So you'll see that very bottom red line. Those are permits where private providers have been utilized for one or the other. There were 1,600, and that included, for example, the hospital. So again, it's one of those things where really the raw number of permits of where that's being used may not be as important as the job value associated with those permits when you're talking about from a revenue standpoint. On the inspection trend side, for county inspectors, we had about 47,024 versus 8,000 in contracted inspectors. We are required to have contracted inspectors. We use those as a backup when for staffing issues or a variety of other reasons. We try to keep that number as low as possible because it is significantly more expensive to use that versus county inspectors. I am very lucky to have an immensely talented and professional group in the building code area from the building official down. However, in certain key areas of that program, we do have an issue with a combination of an aging workforce and some troubles in recruitment. That is going to be a huge focus in the coming year, in the coming years, but especially in the coming year. It's really an immediate need to keep that number certainly stop it from growing and hopefully get that purple line back down. So another key focus is leveraging technology. You're going to see later in this presentation that the state has continually and openly demanded more out of the permitting process while shortening statutorily mandated timeframes. You will see that the state has suggested dealing with that by expanding staff. But in this environment, I don't necessarily think that's the best approach. Rather, becoming more efficient would be my preference. I have been lucky to inherit an office culture left by the guy to my right where efficiency as a core tenet of the department, and I fully expect that culture to continue and even build on it. So as you can see, between 2009 and 2024, there was a 90% increase in efficiency regarding records that P&D processed through Excella. So that's just an easy way that we can pull data to get a metric of our efficiency, and we've gone up by 90% on that metric. As far as the virtual inspection counts that you'll see on the bottom left, not only do virtual inspections allow us to improve efficiency, but they actually result in superior inspections in most cases. For example, our inspectors don't get on roofs to inspect roofs, but with virtual inspections, we can and do have contractors do that for us, sending us high quality, high resolution images to look at. And we also can and do ask for more images when we feel the need for them to do that quality inspection. And as you can see, the utilization of that has gone up very significantly since 2021, an increase of 235%. And similar to that, on the permit side for the applications submitted online, that's not just something we prefer for efficiency. We've done a number of projects, we've done polls, we've done outreach, and that's what customers want. They want to be able to do their business online. They don't necessarily want to have to come through the door if they don't have to. They certainly don't want to pick up the phone. They want to just be able to do things online like people are so used to doing these days. And so between 2020 and 2024, we've gotten up to 91%. So I said before, one of the few things that you can use the building code revenue on is to upgrade technology and software systems to enhance service delivery. Well, thanks to the board approval of last year, we're doing just that, where the board approved us to use $5.3 million in building funds for an upgrade in Excella. It's very much needed, again, not only for efficiency, but to provide public service. One of the biggest complaints we get is about our BAS portal. It's kind of our public portal that we use. It's our online interface to the public for records and a variety of other reasons. And it is getting clunky. It's old. It's built on very old software. And this is going to allow us to go to the newest version. We're calling it BAS 2.0, but it's actually several versions ahead of where we're at now. And it also allows us to do Open Counter, which we're very excited. It's a decision tree-based software. So long story short, somebody could go online, really get an idea of what they can and can't do with their property. And once they decide what they want to do with their property, let's say they want to build a pool or whatever, it'll walk them through from start to finish, whether they can do it, how to do it, here's the permitting process, here's the information we need from start to finish. So it's a really user-centric platform. It also, as far as the backbone, the core Excella system, it's going to transitioning to a cloud-based model, which allows for quarterly updates. So like most new software, you're not buying one version anymore. It's constantly going to update for you to the latest version. That allows for reduced maintenance costs as well, because we're not housing all the servers. And what we're most excited about internally is applying Excella best practices. We've forked our old software over the years for a variety of reasons that we needed to use that at the time, but now it's time to go back to kind of a streamlined approach and user experience, which will allow us to do a variety of things, including using the enhanced reporting database. That will allow us to see the bottlenecks in our processes in real time. It's designed to allow us to see where things are stalling out and things of that nature, so it could really be helpful from an efficiency standpoint. And then the GIS integration, those are the maps that both the public uses and will use internally. And so that'll allow us to increase the information we're providing through that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On the GIS? I mean, I know the property appraiser does a lot of that too on their own. So do they interact, your GIS, or strictly counties?
The two GIS systems themselves don't interact, but we use each other's data to build our GIS. And if you want more detail, I think Katie's here.
No,
Okay.
that,
But
that's
yeah,
okay. I was
so
just,
we collect data from the property appraiser that we integrate to our GIS system, and I believe the same happens in reverse as well.
and their pictometry helps you, right? I
Yes.
mean, you have access to that, like a license type situation?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
There's a weekly exchange of data back and forth between the county and the property appraiser for new COs, new addresses, new parcels, and all of that. So the databases are pretty up to date.
Okay,
And that-
thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Will that help the lines get a little bit clearer on parcels,
So
the new program?
it might. I can't say for sure, to be honest. I mean, I don't, the issues with those lines, I see it the same on the property appraiser as well. And so I'm not really sure where that issue lies that's causing it. I know what you're talking about. There tend to be just slightly off. And I'd have to dig into the source of that issue to see if that would be addressed through this or not.
Not for nothing, just real quick. When I worked there more than 10 years ago, that was the constant talk of the map department. I'm sure it's unchanged. So, I mean, 300 some odd thousand parcels in Brevard County, right? Pretty big task.
So that's kind of, so far I've gone through the big programs in my department, so I'm going to start to go a little quicker as we go through. They're certainly not less important for a budgetary standpoint to have a less impact. The planning, zoning, and land development, that includes comprehensive planning, zoning, subdivision, site plans. Some planning and zoning trends. The site plan, subdivision, and zoning applications, you can see between 2020 and 2024 have gone up significantly. Fees and charges for services, however, remain pretty flat. Once again, it's not so much the number, it's the type. So some 2024 accomplishments for zoning. I know I've met with each of your offices, I believe, at this point, to talk about the EAR. That was transmitted in November of 2024. We received a response on January 21st, 2025. That was quite the effort just to get to that point. Obviously, there's still more to go. And then we had the Brevard Barrier Island Protection Act, which created one of 5 areas of critical state concern in the state, the first in many, many years that was created in the state. So Florida Commerce is continuing to conduct an audit-style review of our comprehensive plan and LDRs as they relate to the South Beaches area. We transmitted our amendments to the comprehensive plan to try to be consistent with that in November. We're continuing to develop that based on the state's commerce, and that will be coming your way in the coming months, and really weeks and months. The major 2025 zoning projects, again, dealing with the area of critical state concern, comprehensive plan aspect is just the first step. And then we're going to be really delving into the code, which is actually, in some ways, could be an even more significant effort, really amending the county ordinances to be consistent with the area of critical state concern. Of course, the adoption of the Evaluation and Appraisal Report, or EAR, and then, and this is not new, this is consistent for us, but it's critical, 25% of the board's business is initiated by planning and development. When by board's business, I mean agenda business, with zoning as a focus. So, of course, we're always trying to continually provide you with the best information and accurate information we can so you can make good decisions. The next program is contractor and code compliance. I'm not going to spend too long on that. I know you all are very familiar with, your staff interacts with code enforcement on a regular basis. What we do, I will just highlight the sea turtle protection one, that we're going to be ramping up consistent with the area of critical state concern legislation, so that you're going to see ramping up a little bit. Short-term rentals, we've prioritized based on board direction. And then, of course, we're always focused on life safety issues like unsafe buildings. Code enforcement trends, this gets a little interesting because the relationship between the cases and revenue is not really what you expect. There's not a direct correlation, and that you especially see that if you expand it out over a number of years, and I've looked at that before. Rather, the revenue on the code enforcement side is associated with the housing market. Most code enforcement cases in our system are not actually associated with a single cent in revenue. That is because we have a voluntary compliance rate of well over 90% of cases complying prior to hearing, which is a great thing, but it means we're not collecting any revenue from it. The revenue is derived from those cases that sit over a very long period of time collecting daily fines. We attach liens to property, so eventually when the property is sold, those liens are paid when the sale happens. So when property is tending to change hands more often, that's when you see the revenue increase. And of course, there's also the outlier payments. Every once in a while, and this happened in 2024, somebody will sell a property that happens to have a very large lien on it, over $100,000, and of course, that'll cause your revenue to spike a little bit. The next program is the Licensing, Regulation, and Enforcement Fund. So we register two types of licenses. There's the county contractors, which we actually create their license. Those are people for a variety of reasons have chosen to be licensed in and through Brevard County. And so we do their exam approval, certifications, license issuance, and renewal processes. And then we have the state certified contractors. So those are people who are already licensed to contract through the state. So we're looking to register them in the system. And so we check their insurance and certificates. Licensing renewals have trended downward, although they've remained stable over the past few years, but they trended downward initially due to deregulation initiated by the state. So effectively, we don't regulate anything differently than the state does under state law now. So anybody who's licensed in the county could theoretically be licensed through the state to do the same permitting work. Nevertheless, there is a good reason to continue to be licensed through Brevard County. And frankly, it's customer service. We will walk people through their issues that they have with their license and things like that. So many people, at least 1,366, have chosen to continue to be licensed through the county. And you can see the revenue initially dropped off from that, but it's remained stable since then. This is the last slide I'm going to focus on, and I spoke to this a bit before, but I think it's worth reiterating as we look to the future and the challenges that the P&D faces. There's been a trend of increasing state mandates on our activities, meaning more is expected in less time throughout the development process. While I chose to highlight a couple of bills that became law in the last legislative session, and you can see this is language directly from the final bill analysis, and both say that the bill could impact local governments to the extent that they may have to hire more employees to meet the prescribed timeframes. They say similar to that. But that's just two of them, and that's actually been a trend over a period of years, and based on the bills I've seen filed this year, I don't think that there's any sign of let up. So that just makes it all the more important to carry on the efficiency initiatives that Mr. Calkins started. We must do more with the available resources that we have, and P&D fully intends to confront that challenge head on and succeed in that challenge. And I believe that we have a very, very bright future. We have a strong future. I'm very excited about it. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, questions for Billy? Any questions for Billy? We'll move beyond questions and a comment. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that we have talked in depth about the BAS system and all of that, so I just really appreciate that that's getting updated, and I love that the step-by-step process for the customers online will just be basically customizable to what their needs are, and so I just think that's a really great thing, and I wanted to highlight that, so thank you.
Thank you. We're extremely excited about that.
Any other comments? Good job, Billy.
Thank you.
Again, as always. All right. I think Myra, right? All right, Larry, you also have 5 minutes.
Is this based on level of budget? I got 3 minutes now.
That's a good point.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleased to present the work of Myra and our challenges and some of our successes.
You might have to point the mic up a little bit. I know you're a little taller than Billy. Okay.
Okay, I have to go over here.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I was going to share a bit about our successes and our challenges and, of course, our budget. So I think one thing that's come up a lot lately, at the federal level and I think locally is this aspect of DOGE and accountability, those types of things. So CRAs come under a number of different accountability standards. These are some of those factoids created by the state. We have agency oversight is delegated from you as the Board of Governance. The commissioners are the actual Board of Governance for MIRA, and you've delegated the operational activity and budget authority on your approved budget to a 7-member Board of Advisors. We have about 2.75 Brevard County staff. I'm the Executive Director, and I report directly to the Assistant County Manager, County Manager. Our budget is developed through the assistance of the County Manager, Assistant County Manager, and mainly the Budget Department through Jill and staff. The Advisory Board is directly accountable to the Governing Board. The agency must follow all the statutes in two regulatory statutes. There's Chapter 163, Part 3 in the Florida Code. And unusually, so MIRA is a community redevelopment agency, but MIRA is also comes under, as a dependent district to the county. We come under a different set of the code, Chapter 189, Florida statutes, as a special dependent district. So the standards that we have to follow include submitting an annual report to the commissioners, to our commissioners, and that's due March 31st, as well as all CRAs in the county have to provide that annual report to the Board of County Commissioners by March 31st. The statute that was added in 2020 requires that each community redevelopment agency prepare an independent audit. I just received our audit today. So that will be included in the annual report, and then we are required by state statute to also post that on our website. There are a couple other things. Anytime when it comes to billing or finance, we, like all county departments and agencies, all of that goes through the county finance, which is I think makes us highly accountable in terms on the finance end. And we have to follow, with the 2020 statute, all CRAs were required to follow the procurement policies of their governing board. So in our case, we follow county procurement policies. One thing that's unique, I think, to CRAs to be mindful of, when a CRA is created, they have to have a community redevelopment plan. CRAs are limited to their expenditures that are qualified under the statute, and the projects and programs have to be in that redevelopment plan. So that's a very novel idea. I appreciate that a lot. So that's what we always have to go back to when we do a check on what we're doing. Is it in the plan, at least in a program or project level, and of course in the CPI. So that's the CIP. So a couple things about MIRA. I think each CRA is very unique because each community is unique. So in MIRA's case, we are a crossroads to Port Canaveral, the second largest commercial passenger port in the world. You all know that. The Atlantic Beaches and the Kennedy Space Center. These are some key areas of the county in terms of tourism and traffic volume and economic activity. One thing I say a lot about the Merritt Island Redevelopment Agency, which is kind of something people don't think about too much. We cover less than 10% of Merritt Island property. That goes into the TIF portion that goes into the TIF fund. 90%, probably more of the CRA properties that are in our targeted area are not residential properties. All the residential properties are not part of the TIF, almost. Basically, we focus on the corridors of the Barge Canal, Courtney Parkway, State Route 520, and State Route 528. The average year built for commercial structures in the redevelopment area is 1978. This presents a lot of redevelopment challenges. Another thing to note, and maybe Tad, you can correct me on this. So having been mostly redeveloped by 1978, I believe the stormwater regulation came in around that time, 1978, which means that sets us in place for having a lot of property in the redevelopment area that was originally built without any stormwater regulation. One of the challenges that Merritt Island faces is when created, it went from 3,000 population in 1960 to 30,000 in 1970. That's a 900% increase. That was due to the space race. And a lot of people running the Merritt Island to be close to where they worked. And there was largely a very unregulated environment, septic tanks, small lot sizes, all types of things that occurred, including the digging of creating waterfront property with all the canals and those types of things that you could probably never do today. Our mission focus, therefore, is alleviating blight, fostering beautification, improving public infrastructure. I should say this, that about 86% of our major expenditures programmatically and project-wise are public infrastructure projects. I'll go back to this just one more time. We also try to focus on modal networks and mobility to help the Space Coast Area Transit System, bus shelters, those types of things. And we work very closely with, my background's mainly 30 years in economic development. And so we work very closely with redevelopment activity from the commercial sector. The state statute requires that we work with the private sector. So we provide data. We do a number of things to make that happen. MIRA actually, you may be surprised, doesn't have a lot of incentives to offer to private sector, unlike a lot of other CRAs. But what we do have is we try to leverage solid, good quality redevelopment activity through the use of infrastructure improvements and beautification. Here is our total operating revenues, $1.513984 million. That's generated through capturing two millages that are in the county, the general fund millage and the fire MSTU. Another thing that I don't think sometimes people think about CRAs is that the other 80% of the millages are spread countywide. There's no, the base is not frozen on those millages. Here's our budget. Operating, $916,000. Capital outlay this year is very large, unusually large, largely because of the amphitheater project that's under contract. And grants and aid, that's a combination of mostly this year environmental brownfield projects, and there were some former facade grants that were paid out. In compensation and benefits, $285,000. I should have brought my water. This is, we tried to create a, oh, thank you. We tried to create a basic TIF model because understanding tax increment financing, especially for the layperson, is a little difficult. So when MIRA was created in 1988, I believe, after the space industry started to fall down, there was a need with, and also after the buildings were starting to age, the county commissioners at that time approved the creation of MIRA, primarily focusing on the commercial core. So that's the existing tax base. And then the increase in taxes only on those two millages is what goes into what's called a trust fund. So back to the redevelopment plan, our money is limited to what goes into the trust fund unless we're going out after grants. This is a graph of our increment revenues from 2002 to 2024. I think this graph in many ways might represent the county during that period. So obviously you can see in 2008, our increment revenues peaked, meaning our property values peaked. And then there's a big slide, as you all know, especially in North Brevard, Central Brevard, down pretty far. And then in 2020, 2021, we were going towards that peak, and we felt it would be good to collaborate with Public Works in the rebuilding of the Sea Ray Drive Bridge. So what we did is we took a 20% reduction from MIRA's TIP income to support the construction of the Sea Ray Drive Bridge, which at that time was going to be about $5.5 million, so about half the cost. That's for 10 years. The bridge has substantially increased in cost since then, and it's nearing completion, thanks to Public Works. This goes back to one thing I wanted to, just try to emphasize to some degree. On an annual recurring basis, for every $1 million of increased taxable value from a redevelopment project in the redevelopment area, and that's just in the redevelopment area, in this commercial corridors, approximately $2,594 goes into the Myra Redevelopment Trust Fund, and $9,272 would go to all the other Brevard County ad valorem taxing districts. This is some of the grants we received in recent years. We try to leverage the Myra revenue stream with other grant funds, St. John's, FDEP, TDC, US EPA Brownfield Program, FHWA private donations, and we've also helped leverage other grants, like for instance, for the acquisition of Griffiths Landing, Myra contributed $400,000 to leverage a $2 million grant from the Florida Forever Grant Program. Here are some of our projects. This year, the $8.2 million amphitheater project currently under construction. Looks to be completed in November, potentially. $4.7 million came from Myra, $2.5 million came from the TDC, and $1 million from the Florida Department of Commerce. The other project, which is pending, awaiting, I think, final engineering and going out to bid, is a corridor infrastructure project. Total potential cost, at least as we last have known, $4 million, of which Myra will be contributing $2 million. Veterans Memorial Park, we had another project over there which is pending, awaiting matching funds for the Medal of Honor tribute area. At Griffiths Landing, which is one of Florida's last forever working waterfronts, we are looking at leveraging $300,000 with an $890,000 grant from the Florida Department of Commerce. Right now, there's a building over there that was flattened, known as Miss Apples, in the last hurricane. And that's where we're going to focus that. That isn't actually a property owned by Brevard County under the Management of Natural Resources, but it's considered a vital property by the Myra Board. Here's just a small semblance of the projects that we've done in the recent past. Just in the corridor area, or the first CRA area. Probably too many for me to name now, but I wanted to give you some semblance of the type of projects that we've involved ourselves in. Largely infrastructure projects. I think the corridor looks good, and making it attractive is considered by the Myra Board to be an economic incentive. Not a direct grant, but remember, it's infrastructure and beautification to incentivize investment dollars. So some of our challenges and the redevelopment trends on Merritt Island: still blighted conditions on Courtney Parkway and State Route 520. Redevelopment of key sites with national tenants. We've got a lot of national tenant interest from redevelopers, so that's a good sign from a market point of view. Increased traffic volumes on State Route 520 and Courtney Parkway. Most of these are, we're going to do an origination and destination survey to find out where's that traffic originating and going, because we all know that the retail industry has gone pretty much downhill. For every 1% increase of online sales, we lose 10,000 stores in the United States. So we know that largely the mall parking lot is usually vacant, for those 4,000 parking spaces. We know that there's not been a major multifamily development on Merritt Island for the most part, other than river fly-in, for over 20 years. So the traffic being a concern, but I couldn't say that it's actually caused by overdevelopment. Redevelopment is good because we're taking land that has already been developed. Surface water is already going off in the wrong direction, impacting the lagoon. And when you redevelop, we can alleviate some of those considerations. Some say blight in Merritt Island. There is some blight. Merritt Island is right now in a very threshold moment. The blight that's there, that's been aging, since some of those buildings are approaching 60 years old, that's accelerating. But at the same time, because of its market position on the way to the beaches, the traffic volume of 520 and 528 in Courtney, we're seeing accelerated interest in redevelopment. So that's actually a good thing when you consider where we've been. This is probably one of our worst cases of blight. It's an abandoned multifamily development. It's on Courtney Parkway. It was abandoned during the Great Recession, and we're going to hope to work with a redevelopment entity to redevelop this. It was under contract at one time. The contract fell through because the redevelopment, they discovered that with doing their due diligence, they'd have to tear these buildings down. It's been almost 20 years. They're full of graffiti, kids walking through them, and the infrastructure is not suitable for redevelopment. And with code changes, the base flood level, even the retention pond would have to be raised. So it's not a good deal. These are kind of one of the challenges you have with redevelopment. I use the position of it's like This Old House. And we know we've all watched This Old House. So when you do a redevelopment project, you never know what you're going to get into. But here's a real classic case of a dramatic redevelopment that occurred on Merritt Island. On the left side, you have what most Merritt Islanders know as Tingley Marina and RV Park. That's been sitting in a pretty bad shape since 1978. Working with some good redevelopers, we created a project that right now, and I calculated this out, about $376,000 in annual revenue stream goes to the county and Myra. Myra receives about 20% of that. The other $300,000 goes to all the county taxing districts. All right, some projects and programs. This is a major infrastructure project designed for three purposes: to create a beautiful park to attract other redevelopment in the mall area. Another purpose, and probably the prime purpose, if you ask Natural Resources and us, the stormwater lakes were created to handle the 165 acres of runoff in the mall area. So what this will do is stimulate redevelopment when that starts occurring, and it is starting to occur. And thirdly, it provided a place for the veterans to call home. Right now, we're at about 78,000 veterans in this county. This is the end of that project. On the upper left, you'll see that's the same land that you're looking at in the large part of the picture. It was sifted through. It was a horrendous area in terms of blight, and many things had to be cleaned out. And so this final vision, and this was a collaboration with, Myra put in the money for the acquisition of the project. It was a defaulted Pulte home project, condominium project. Myra bought it for about $2.2 million with the permission of the county. And we worked with Public Works and the Brevard Veterans Council, Natural Resources, to bring that project about. Probably right now, we're going to get some numbers on how many people go to this park. Myra also put in the improvements around the lakes. It is getting very, very busy. I've been doing economic development a long time. I never thought I'd see a park be a stimulus for economic development, but that's what's happening. Adjacent to this stormwater lake, We just, there was a site plan approved for a $120 million redevelopment, 300 luxury apartments. We asked the developer, why do you want to be there? The park and the access to the mall and the proximity to the hospital. This is the overview of that. And you can see the amphitheater is sitting in there inside of that park. On the lower right, the brown structure. We invite anybody to come want to tour the construction. We're trying to have tours on a regular basis right now. This is kind of the image during the pre-grant period. It's still going to look like that. The colors may change. This is the Cone Road Septic Sewer Project, another major infrastructure project, $3.6 million collaboration, again with Natural Resources and Public Works. The ditch was there. I'm told cars often went down inside of there and they'd get stuck. We did sidewalks, fences. We took off 80 properties from septic, brought them into the sanitary system. We acquired the grants so that all those commercial property owners didn't have to pay to do that. Here's redevelopment action. What you see in the far left corner is a former Erdman Cadillac dealership. So one of our challenges was all the automobile dealerships are following a national trend to go to the interstates. We've got problems as far as that goes. We have a brownfield program. We worked with the redevelopers, Matthew Development, and what's going up there now is a brand new Chipotle, a pretty high quality L car wash, same model that brand. I think they're in Vieira. A Wawa. We have Christian Brothers Automotive coming in. One of the they've completed 170 automobile franchises in the southeast, and not one of them has gone out of business. They chose this site. They're going to be under construction soon, and a Chinese restaurant is on its way. So they just took the front half of that dealership, and we look forward to seeing what's going to go on the south half. Health First Hospital, redevelopment in action. Again, that's 15-acre site. It was all pretty much impermeable, former Kmart. We know that this hospital, this $410 million hospital, being adjacent to the mall, is going to leverage a lot of other redevelopment activity, whether it's offices, residential, or commercial. This is one concept that we had drafted for the mall area. We're starting to look at some other ones. Some of these things are already coming true. On the south side, the most south side, the red area, that's where that 300-unit luxury apartment complex has been permitted and will be under construction soon. We're trying to provide some concepts to redevelopers. Today, later in the afternoon, we have a community workshop where the public will be invited. We hope to have a large gathering of people coming through and looking at not concepts, but trying to give input on potential concepts. So that's what's coming. We do plan on updating our redevelopment plan. Myra sunsets at 2034 in the current plan. I don't believe we'll be asking for an extension. We just want to utilize the current revenue stream to do some of these larger projects. There are going to be infrastructure projects needed, a number of other types of projects needed to leverage the small into a good, solid redevelopment. One question I often get is, what are you going to do about the mall? First thing I have to say is, Myra doesn't own the mall. We have to respect private property rights. But on the positive side is after about 5 years of my experience in Myra, the mall, as they're very very cooperative now. They're trying to get as much information from us as they can. We try to connect them with redevelopers and potential mall purchases. We share our concepts with them, and we do share the potential for incentives subject to the Board of County Commissioners. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Indoor pickleball courts, right? It's out of the weather.
So, I forgot to say, Myra did, through its brownfield program, we funded a market study. It's a recent market study for the State Route 520 corridor. And some of the recommendations are, obviously, retail would be very difficult given today's retail trends. So mixed-use development seems to be very attractive, especially with the park to the south and the first one coming in here this year under construction. We're seeing a lot of interest in mixed-use development with a retail. There would be retail. So we're thinking about $300 million probably to do the whole thing and that would bring in about a little over $2.5 million in taxes to the county per year. Right now, the taxes collected on the mall are about $296,000 a year. The valuation is $20 million, so.
Questions for Larry? Commissioner Delaney.
And this might be a Frank or a Jill question, but how come Myra gets fire MSTU money?
So back when Myra was created, and they'd have to check on the code, but when the CRAs are created, they capture certain millages. Fire was one, and the other was the general fund millage. In terms of the code on that, I can get back to you, Commissioner Delaney, and tell you how the code is structured to allow that.
Awesome, thank you. And then this one's not really a question, but one of my biggest concerns with the mall redevelopment is I'm really concerned about evacuation times. And so what, if that's the plan for the mall site, that's something that we really got to talk about and find a plan for people, because we can't have people being stuck on bridges when a huge storm is coming. So just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's good, and that should be part of the planning process. But I don't know if there's a code for evacuation times, but we better be looking into that.
Other, Commissioner Goodson.
If you're stuck on a bridge, would that be a state issue rather than a county issue, since the state?
That'd be your issue.
It would be our issue. Are you saying that, Larry? It's our issue?
No.
So you wish for us to fund
No, if
another
you're in the
lane?
car on the bridge.
Well, no, but that's a state, is that a state issue, Frank?
All right.
We're going to have John address the issue for you, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. How's everybody? So we talked about evacuation clearance times. There are studies that do that. The Regional Planning Council heads that one for us. As far as your direct question, that would be a county issue, but we take a lot of steps to make sure that never happens. We have a whole backwards planning process. We make sure everything is done well before we get ourselves in that dangerous point at all.
That's not the question.
Okay, I'm
The
sorry.
question is, if you do everything possible and somebody doesn't leave, and they get hooked on that bridge, being a two-lane bridge, is that a state issue, not having 4 lanes to get them out?
I don't know that it's a state issue. It's probably a joint issue, sir.
So you would say that we'd have to fund half the bridge to put 4 lanes in?
No, we're not responsible for the infrastructure to
Correct.
that. The actual response and movement would be where we would
FDOT.
come in, sir.
Correct. Now, I agree with everything you said, but the funding of building a bigger bridge is state or federal.
100%, sir.
Thank you.
I guess my point was more so that we have to look into making sure that we're planning properly in our development
Yep.
and not overdoing that.
And Commissioner, to help with that point, that is something we spend a lot of time looking at year-round, both with the Planning Council on the numbers, with the state of Florida, with our partners at DOT, and then make sure that when we're actually implementing those, we have good timing and data from the Weather Service, from the Hurricane Center. We use something where we use a light phased evacuation. So we're always adding cushion and doing as much as we can to know. And then there's the behavioral aspect as well, sort of knowing how people will respond. So when we issue evacuation orders and what kind of response we're doing. So that's something we spend a lot of time, energy, and effort making sure we get as right as possible.
Question. Chair, thank you. Can you give us numbers that you say people react to evacuation notices from the barrier islands?
Yes. So in general, the larger the storm, the more people you're going to see evacuate. For big storms, we allow a minimum of 24 hours to get people clear. So categories 3, 4, and 5, we're using those kinds of things.
That's not the question.
Okay.
The question is, Can you tell us numbers of people that evacuate
Oh,
from the
you mean
Barrier?
population?
Yes.
I'm sorry, sir.
from
I
the Barrier
misunderstood. I thought we were
Islands.
talking about clearance times.
After you've done all this planning,
Yes,
you
sir.
must have numbers on how many listen, right?
So listening is harder because that's a behavioral piece. We have about 250,000 people on the Barrier Islands, 275, give or take, that when we talk about a category storm that's going to be of such that we actually evacuate folks from the Barrier Islands, that's the number we use as a planning number, that 250, 275. How many people actually listen, we call that our response rate. That's around 50 to 60%. Yes, sir.
I have another question.
Okay, for a follow-up?
So what's the time right now for evacuations for Merritt Island?
So it's hard to just give you a Merritt Island timeframe. I'd have to
Or
go back and
Barrier
look.
Islands?
Barrier Islands for, like, I assume you want to know worst case, right?
Right.
It's about 19 hours.
Okay. And so if we add, say, 2,000 apartments
Yeah.
somewhere, does that do anything to our numbers?
I'd have to run the numbers because it's not just that. I would imagine it would increase it. Does it increase it an hour or 3 hours? I would say probably not. But I'd want to look at the numbers because it's very much tied to roadway network.
Okay.
When we talk about evacuations, and again, I touched on the idea earlier, we use the phased concept. It's like anything. Just think of it as roads are a big funnel and we're dumping a lot of people in. You dump them all in at once. It doesn't matter how much infrastructure you have. They're going to get stuck, but if you sort of gradually move them through, you can move a whole lot more people in a more efficient manner.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, sir?
More of a comment than a question, but I want to go down this rabbit hole. I know we got a long budget hearing ahead, but when talking about evacuation in condos and apartments, vertical evacuation is the wave of the future where you're building things to Category 5 storm. Actually, some of these new facilities may help us reduce our evacuation time because it gives options.
Yep.
I I could speak to that. I mean, the hospital is being built to Category 4 standard, and that's one reason why the hospital's being built to a Category 4 standard. That's one reason why they're building on Merritt Island. They want to be open and independent for, at least a week, including all your utility systems. They don't want to have to evacuate patients. So, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Larry or a comment? Tad, you have?
I was just going to say is through the development review process, we get traffic information and traffic studies and traffic statements from developers, and all of those are evaluated for the impacts on the roadways and the roadway network.
Thanks, John.
Okay. Any other questions, commissioners, or, okay. Larry, thank you very much. I think let's do this.
Thank you, commissioners.
Let's take 7 minutes. So let's all agree we're going to be back here at quarter after, okay? Quarter after. If you'll find your way to your seats, we'll get started again. We have a very exciting presentation from Solid Waste. You're going to miss it. Oh, that's John Scott. Yeah. The EOC operator. I think we're ready, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you for your time. I'm Tom Mulligan, the Director of the Solid Waste Management Department. On the screen right now is our mission statement. We protect public health and the environment. We are the final resting place for everything that nobody wants anymore. So a little background on this. We are the only county actually in the state of Florida that has a solid waste disposal act with the Florida legislature. What that did in 1967 is that it granted the Board of the County Commissioners the power to establish a solid waste collection and disposal system. It requires all entities in the county to use that system, and also it prohibits disposal of waste that's generated from outside the county. That gives us control, and that also keeps capacity in our landfills for the tax-paying residents of Brevard. It also granted the board the authority to issue bonds to finance the system, which we will talk about more a little later in this, and granted the board the right to create exclusive franchises to help operate the system. We'll get in that when we talk about collection. So we have 5 different solid waste facilities. Basically what you've got is the date is when they came into function, except for US 192, which is 1991 is when we actually purchased the land. Central Disposal Facility is our Class 1 landfill. It's the only one in Brevard County. Then you've got our 2 transfer stations to take waste from the north or the south portion of the county, consolidate it, and get it to the Central Disposal Facility. Sarno Road Class 3 landfill is for the Class 3 waste that's generated in the south part of the county. US 192 site has finally started construction after 33 years. And the Mockingbird Way mulching facility is also under construction, and we're replacing the Titusville transfer station and expanding the pad there. This is a layout of our facilities and where they are in Brevard County. And you can see the green north service area, everything collected in there will either go to the Mockingbird Way mulching facility or the Titusville transfer station. The red central area, everything collected there goes straight to the central disposal facility. In the south yellow service area, the south service area, everything now goes to the Sarno transfer station or the Class 3 landfill. And eventually, it will go to the US 192 site to replace the Sarno Road Class 3 landfill. So let's talk about our programs and services. It's basically split up into 2 different things. One is collection and recycling. There's not much on our side of that because it is contracted out. So the curbside collection is done by the contractors. We monitor and administer the contract. On the disposal side, which is where more of the county employees are involved, with the operation of the transfer stations, the landfill, household hazardous waste, any tires, waste, tires, metal, white goods, vegetative waste. We also do recycling education. That's where our administrative and finance is, and also in engineering, permitting, environmental compliance. So that's where everything for the county employees is. We all work on the disposal side of this. And we'll get into that, the 2 different parts, and get a little more detailed on that. Now, the budget itself, this is an estimated fiscal year 25-26 budget. We're still fine-tuning it. I don't believe that these numbers are going to change radically. They will change a little bit. The first one with solid waste collection is through the collection assessments. Everything below that is all funded by solid waste disposal assessments. So you've got $25.8 million for collection. You've got $30.6 million for operation of our actual facilities. $55 million for capital improvement projects, which is expansion of the system to keep capacity for the residents. Equipment replacement is about $8 million. Transfers and debt service is about $10 million, and then restricted reserves, which is used only for closure of landfills, that's $37 million. So it looks like a lot of money, but that keeps, basically what it is by Florida statute, we have to have that much money in case the county walked away from doing solid waste. The state wants you to have enough money that they could close those landfills without spending any additional money. So that is an escrow fund that we maintain. Total number of positions right now is 165, and I say positions because we don't have 165 employees. We do still struggle with some vacancies. There are some vacancies both in the professional side because the solid waste industry is kind of a niche industry, and it gets hard to find civil engineers that want to be in this kind of an industry. And then on the boots on the ground, I think in Mr. Bernath's previous presentation, he talked about the people that are out there all day in all kinds of weather, and they're making about the same money that someone could make at McDonald's. We have that same issue for some of these boots on the ground people, but they're also standing in your rotting garbage and getting christened by seagulls, so it makes it even a little less attractive. So we do have some recruiting and retainage issues. We try training for people to move up, but that becomes a double-edged sword because as soon as someone moves up, we've got a slot that needs to be filled again. So it's a constantly changing battle, but we're actually getting better than it was a couple of years ago. So let's go into the collection first so that we can get a little detail on that. That consists of all the residential properties receiving services in unincorporated Brevard County. But what it also does in our resolution is that it regulates the rates charged for collection service at commercial properties. So this is all paid for by the non-ad valorem solid waste collection assessment, and that only goes out to residential properties. Commercial properties actually have to contract with the franchise collector themselves, so we don't deal with paying for collection for them. There are no county employees paid out of this fund. It's strictly to pay for waste management's contract. They hold the current contract. It started on October 1st, 2020. It runs through September 30th, 2027. I highlighted that number because what that means is that under the current term of the commission, that you are going to be the ones who are negotiating and executing the new contract. What we like to do is we really need that contract in place by October 1st, 2026, so that if Waste Management does not win, the incumbent doesn't win the new contract, whoever does, they have 1 year to get the infrastructure in place so that they can service the county, on day one. One thing you might want to recall is that there was a 39% increase in rates once that new contract started, and it's got a 3% cap every year for increases in rates. There's a small reserve fund for disaster debris collection, and I will talk about that a little bit later. So here's our budget, the revenues. The majority of the revenues for collection basically are from the residential collection assessments. That's, all the money we're paying to Waste Management to collect your yard waste, your recycling, and your garbage. There's a little bit of balance forward that we have each year, but really the majority of this goes straight from the solid waste collection assessment straight into paying Waste Management to do the collection. For our expenditures, as you can see, it's 93% of that. We do have a little bit of transfers that go to other departments. That's basically the property appraiser, the tax collector. Those are the people who actually are like Billy had talked about and Tad had talked about, that they're tracking all the new properties and all the sizes of the properties, and the tax collector is putting the bills out and tracking that, and they're the ones who are actually collecting the revenue. And then we have an operating reserve, which usually ends up being the fund that we use for disaster debris collection. As you can see, $1.5 million, it's really not a lot of money. Nicole, I think, cost $2 million to recover. Milton was $3.6 million. And if you look at something like Hurricane Irma, that was not even a close direct hit on Brevard County, and that was about $11 million to collect. And we have to put that money up front to have the contractors out there collecting, and then we hope that we can get 85 to 100% of that back from FEMA within 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So there is a situation where in the past we have borrowed from our disposal revenue to do this, and I'll talk about that again a little bit later. So with disposal, that is actually countywide. A solid waste disposal assessment goes on every tax bill for residential and commercial in all of Brevard County. Like I had said previously, because of the Solid Waste Disposal Act, it requires every entity in the county to use our system. So we take that out. Even if you're living in a municipality, you may not be paying a collection assessment, but you are paying for a disposal assessment to use our landfills. That's where the funds for all our solid waste operations are. That's where the funds for our employees is. That's where we get all the funds for our capital equipment replacement and the funds for our capital improvement program, which is to expand and make sure we have capacity for the system. So the budget, our revenues, about $141.5 million. You can see that about 34% of that is actually the revenue. That's not just the disposal assessments. That is also from interest. You'll see the majority of that is balanced forward, and we'll break that down a little bit better in expenditures because it looks like a big chunk. But one thing to also note is the impact fees that make up a very small piece of that pie. Impact fees, solid waste impact fees can only be used for expansion of the system. So right now, what we are using them for is they are part of the debt service for the current 2023 series bonds that we used to fund the system. So in our expenditures, you can see now 22% of it is actually what it costs us to run our facilities and pay our employees. That debt service, that is taking into account a Series 2025 bond that we will talk about. And then you see our capital outlay now. That includes both the capital improvement programs to expand the system, and that also includes equipment replacements. Then the restricted reserves, the escrow I had spoken about, that's your $34 million, and then again transfers to other departments. This includes the tax collector, the property appraiser, the clerk of the courts, as well as code enforcement, I believe, because code enforcement is going to be enforcing Ordinance 94, which has to do with litter and has to do with whether or not they've been putting the garbage out correctly, putting land clearing out or C&D out that isn't collected under our contract, and they would be the ones who deal with the property owners and tell them what needs to be done. So let's talk about the actual projects that we have right now, our prioritized projects. So the US 192 solid waste facility is currently under construction. We're in phase one. That's basically the earthwork, our stormwater. We're doing the wetlands. We're doing roads. We're also doing overhead, underground utilities. The construction and oversight is about $33.4 million. Right now, that has been funded with a Series 2023 bond, and the remainder is going to need to be funded with a Series 2025 bond. Phase two, which will have the actual infrastructure, the scale house, the Class 3 landfill, leachate collection and storage, and all the overhead utilities. Construction and oversight right now is estimated to be about $45.8 million, and we anticipate that to be funded with a Series 2027 and a 2029 bond. So the Titusville Transfer Station, that is also something that is right now under construction. Construction and oversight is about $21.5 million. That, again, is being funded with the Series 2023 bond, and we anticipate also the remainder of the contract to be funded with the Series 2025 bond. It's very important to have this project ongoing. The current transfer station is 48 years old. It was actually built in 1976. It uses obsolete technology. It relies on compaction of the garbage into the back of these steel trailers. The trailers, you're using a lot of weight for the steel and a hydraulic ram that pushes the garbage back out of the trailer. We'll have a more efficient design of the new transfer station that'll be more like the Sarno transfer station with open top aluminum trailers, which will leave more weight for the waste tonnage, be more efficient. We'll have less trips that we'll need, less fuel, less tires, less wear and tear on the machines themselves. Because it's so old, it's constantly needing to be repaired. There are no parts for a lot of that, the mechanical pieces that are there, and things have to be fabricated these days. So when something breaks down, we actually have to create them ourselves to rebuild it. The one thing also, because it's going to be built on the Mockingbird Way, right now there's no scale house, no flow control. So commercial establishments can't use Mockingbird Way or the Titusville Transfer Station because we don't have the scales. We can't measure how much they're dumping and charge it to their accounts. This will accommodate it with a manned scale house, so commercial operations will no longer have to drive down to Cocoa. It's also going to expand the pad, so we'll have more space for vegetative waste. So it'll make it into a much more efficient facility, and I think it'll last the north portion of Brevard County for many decades to come. Our third major project that's a critical need is the CDF South landfill. Cell 3, we've already got a permit to construct cells 3 through 5. Cell 3 construction bid documents are pretty much anticipated to be in our hands by the end of next week. We look at construction and oversight. Right now it's estimated to be about $45 million. We anticipate that to be funded with the Series 2025 bond and a Series 2027 bond. Remember, CDF is the only Class 1 landfill in Brevard County, so having that capacity, the additional capacity, is very important. Cells 1 and 2 reach capacity in mid to late 2028. In addition to that, the Sarno Road Class 3 landfill is reaching capacity. Once that ends receiving waste, That's going to increase the amount of waste going into the central disposal facility by 20%. Right now, cell 3 is designed, it's a 53-acre cell. It is anticipated to take us into at least 2037 or 2038 before we need to do cells 4 or 5 at that point. So it will guarantee us a lot more capacity and get us into the future. I was just talking to one of the heads of permitting and compliance for the Department of Environmental Protection this morning about other counties, and she was talking about the fact that a lot of other counties are running up to the same problem where they're behind the 8 ball, they may not have the space, they're going to be running out of capacity, and they are looking for, you know, other ways to do things because there's no space and the funding. Of course, it gets more expensive by the year to build these things. She was very happy that we're kind of looking forward and getting ahead of the curve to make sure that the citizens are being well served. So some other things that we've got right now that are going on, and they are also critical, is expansion of the gas collection system. Every Class 1 landfill needs an active gas collection system to collect the landfill gas, the methane. Good part about this is that this project is funded by the closure escrow, the restricted reserves, and also in the last landfill gas purchase contract that we just had done in 2023 with Brevard Energy. We also had a stipulation in there that as we expand, they will contribute 50% to each project up to a cap of $5 million. So that also takes a little bit of the burden financially off of us as well, since they're also benefiting from collection of this gas. There's also the final closure of the Sarno Road landfill. As I stated, it's reaching capacity. We think it's going to last toward the end of this year, but all it takes is a boom in construction or a good hurricane, and we may run out of the space we thought we had. We estimate that right now at about $21 million. Again, that's going to be fully funded by the escrow fund, so we don't have to worry about finding additional funding for that. Again, that's the same thing with the CDF slurry wall. That's almost up to capacity. We've just got I think we've got about 65,000 cubic yards of capacity left, and we leave that for emergencies. If we're having traffic issues in the south landfill, we can take our transfer trailers and take them up to slurry wall. When we do our final closure on that, that'll be funded. We think it's about $21 million from our engineer's estimate, and again, it'll be fully funded by the escrow, so we won't have to worry about finding any additional funding for that. So we talked about our projects, where they are, the 3 major projects for expansion. This expenditure schedule right now, this is coming out of the most recent version of the engineer's report that they're doing. It's the third-party report that's necessary for the public bonding itself. So we got this information on Monday night. I got just enough time to get it into this slide and get it updated. But you can see with that schedule where we did the fiscal year 23 bond, and we got $53.9 million, but about 20.2 of that ended up paying for a commercial paper loan that we needed while we were building cell 2 previously. So you can see the costs and the payout where we're going to need a bond in 25, in 27, and 29 to make sure that we can fund this. So you've seen where we are and where we're going, and I think the next slide will give us an idea of how we ended up getting where we are. This is our disposal unit billing history. The top rows are what the actual billing unit history is, including in fiscal year 23 when we could get, the board actually approved us to do incremental increases to start keeping up with inflation. On the bottom is what those disposal assessments would have been had we kept up with inflation. And the one thing to note is that for the 30 years from fiscal year 1992 through fiscal year 2022, the disposal assessments themselves decreased by 6.6%. And over that same 30-year period, the consumer price index for garbage and trash increased by 110%. So we really fell behind on our revenue keeping up with the costs. Again, I'm grateful to the board for allowing us to raise them incrementally and not put a heavy burden on the public right away. Another thing to note is that even on the bottom, the bottom 2 rows on the far right, even right now, if we had increased those disposal assessments to those numbers, $198 $560.49 for residential and $560.56 per commercial billing unit, we would still have to borrow money for our major projects, for our CIP, for our expansion. And that still, even raising it that much wouldn't pay cash out of pocket. Another thing to see how we got here and why we do not have a robust capital reserve fund. This is over that same 30-year period, a lot of the projects that we spent the money on. One thing to note is that historically, when the US 192 property was purchased, the original idea was that they were going to build a Class 3 and a Class 1 landfill there, and that they were going to shut down CDF, they were going to shut down Sarno, they were going to shut down everything, and everything was going to be centralized on this one facility. And of course, opposition and legal challenges led us to the point where it was delayed continuously, and what we had to do is start spending money to make sure that the Sarno Road landfill that would last and that the central disposal facility would last while we were trying to figure out our new direction. Another thing that is important to look at is down at the bottom, you can see that in 2022 is when we actually ran out of capital reserves, and that's where we had to get a paper currency loan of $20 million. $16 million of it went to fund the remainder of the construction of Cell 2. Another thing that actually is important to look at is between 2016, the construction of Cell 1, and 22, the construction of Cell 2. You see it went from, now these for your information, these two cells are exact identical, the same design, same construction. They're just mirror images of each other. So you got, in 2016, it cost us $21.12 million to build, and then in 2022, it went up to 32. So over that 6-year period, we had a 53% increase in construction costs. And that's, it hasn't exactly decreased since then as well. It's construction costs, I think Jill had gone over that in her original presentation, that it was what, 60% so far we've had an increase? So again, with the trend data, this is something to also look at. I shortened the time period, this is 15 years, but you can see the upper black line, that is the tonnage that goes into the central disposal facility. The lower red line is the tonnage that goes in annually to the Sarno Road Class 3 landfill. You can see that about in 2017, we had a sudden increase, and that's going to be correlated to both economic conditions and probably development in Brevard County. But you can see that there was a giant increase in the amount of waste that's coming into CDF. We don't see that decreasing in the future. Another thing to keep in mind is that red line of the Sarno Road landfill. As soon as we run out of capacity, that red line now becomes part of the black line on the top, and that's your 20% increase in waste that's coming into that facility. Next trend that we're looking at is landfill compactor costs. Now, landfill compactor, of course, is one of the most important pieces of equipment. You're spreading out and you're compacting that waste to a uniform density. It's saving airspace. It's most efficient, making things as efficient as possible. You can ignore 2019 through 2015 because the alternating years were actually, they don't represent the same piece of equipment. They represent different manufacturers of equipment that we were buying on alternating years. It's after 2016 when one of those manufacturers went out of business that 2016 all the way through 24 is the same basically make and model of compactor. And you can see that over that 8-year period, the cost of that compactor has basically doubled. And that is actually, that's representative of every piece of major equipment, our heavy equipment, excavators, our bulldozers, front end loaders. Everything has gone up just in that same manner. So what used to be 8 years ago in annual equipment replacement fund of $3 million to $4 million is now today $6 million to $8 million per year for us to replace the same amount of equipment. Here are some of the things that the board has done in the past to help us with rising costs of equipment and operation. We were authorized for a public hearing to consider the assessment increases and the engineering study to finance our 5-year CIP. We actually had that public hearing in July 2022 where the board approved the incremental increases, which now we went through actual solid increases, and now what they are is every year it's all tied to the CPI for garbage and trash. So each year we calculate that in March and put that into our budget. December 2022, that's when the board authorized us for a commercial paper loan of $20 million. That was to finance the ongoing capital improvement projects, which was completing the construction of Cell 2, putting in a gas system in Cell 1 of the South landfill that was required by regulation, and then the remainder of that was used for design for Cells 3, 4, and 5, and also some US 192 design. Then in August, that's when the board approved us to actually sell the $53.8 million in bonds, and that was what started paying for, right now, the beginning of the construction for US 192 and also the construction of the Titusville Transfer Station. And then most recently in November, the board authorized a revised engineering study, which is what we're doing right now, and the numbers that I used for the CIP expenditure schedule in the previous slides. So this is my last slide. So I tried to make it as somewhat quick. But these are what are up for future board consideration. You know, for collection and recycling, you're looking at the contract, like I stated, it is running out September 30th, 2027. We want to look to have a contract in place by October 1st, 2026. So that RFP is anticipated to be advertised. I am putting some finishing touches on it, and I'm going to get it circulated because I know you guys are going to want to look at it. I know county management is going to want to look at it. So I'm going to get that out, and we can all start putting our final touches on it. That's not just the RFP, but the contract itself, so that we can all look at what issues we've had in the past and how we can address them in the future. While we do that, we might want to consider the increases in solid waste collection assessments. Like you saw from our current contract, there was an immediate 39% increase in costs. I showed you how much we usually have in reserves when a natural disaster happens and what money we have available to pay for contractors. The board might want to take into consideration when they do an increase in these collection assessments, also taking into consideration having a reserve fund for natural disasters. Because in the past with Hurricane Irma, we had the money that was in the solid waste collection fund, but we had to borrow $10 million out of the solid waste disposal fund. We don't have $10 million in the solid waste disposal fund to borrow anymore. We're funding all these projects through bonding at this point. And that takes us to the actual capital improvement program financing. According to, right now, the latest iteration of our engineering report, what we are looking at the board considering is a $32.8 million bond in this fiscal year, then a $31 million bond in 27, and a $43.2 million bond in 2029. And of course, I put the asterisk in there because it's all subject to changes in construction costs, updates on our own cash flow, and analysis. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them to the best of my ability.
Questions for Tom?
Got a question.
Commissioner Goodson.
Thank you, Chair. Has there ever been any consideration given to privatizing the dump?
I think in the past, the consideration has been given. I think that well, I haven't heard anyone actually expressing that interest.
Okay. Can you name a county in the state of Florida that has privatized their dump?
That has privatized? I don't know of one that has privatized. I know ones that started with a private landfill, like Okeechobee. And you've got, there are private landfills around the state. The nearest class one to us is the JED landfill in Osceola County. Right. But I'm not aware of a county that started with.
No, it might not have started, but had a county dump, but then privatized it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't.
You're not aware of it?
Myself, I'm not aware.
Could you research and get back to me Duval County?
Duval County, I will do so.
Yeah, and of course, why would you not want to privatize? That would take you totally out of any other than management of it. What would be a reason not to privatize?
One reason not to privatize for us is that the rates, the disposal assessments, the gate charges, they are not going to be controlled by the Board of County Commissioners. You've got the JED landfill, like a private landfill. They will set their rates with whatever they feel like setting them at the time. So for us, if we did that, it would be, one thing that you'd be doing is you'd be putting, for privatization, you'd be putting a profit percentage in play as well. So you're going to not only be getting just enough money to serve the public and expand the system somewhere along the line, because it's a capitalist operation, that the capitalism kicks in and someone's going to want to make a profit out of this. So you're going to be paying more than you normally would.
Okay. Sir? Now, you just recently changed the pricing or the venue on how landscapers dump or private people dump. And I know that was our office was a problem because everybody was up in arms. Has that cleared up any or straightened up any?
It's gotten a lot quieter.
Okay.
I think people have gotten used to.
You killed off people and they're not coming back?
No, we try to be as nice as possible.
All right.
But I think people have gotten used to the fact that the disposal assessment really does not cover an unlimited amount of waste coming from a residential property.
Well, I'd like you to know that when I go, I carry a birth certificate, a marriage certificate, a tax bill, and 2 driver's licenses, and I do get through. But thank you so much.
Just
Thank you, Chair.
a follow-up to his point real quick. I think we had talked one time about something like an e-pass for the people who go through there a lot to try to speed them up. Is that something that?
Actually, we were just bringing that back up because of the fact that the one thing about providing your identification and your proof of origin does put a slightly longer amount of time that you spend at the scale house. So seeing which people we could pair up with what's called the wizard, which is lane 2, where they can just type in a code and it's going to weigh them, and they've already got their tear on the tear weight in the database. And it makes, we use it and Waste Management uses it right now, and we're starting to look at what other operations we can make that available for, so that it takes them out of the line that has to go through the scale house.
Commissioner Atkinson.
Just quickly, you mentioned staffing issues. I'm curious, if you were going to put a percentage on it, what's the percentage of open positions you guys have?
It's not as high as a lot of other departments, actually. We've been doing very well, and I think it was because of our dedication to the training programs that we have. When we have our, especially with the job fairs that we have here, we highlight that and make sure that people understand that they can come in with almost no skills and no training and come in at the lowest level, and we can train them to be heavy equipment operator 1, train them more equipment to be a heavy equipment operator 2, operator 3, become a lead, so that these people can see that there is a path forward and it's not just a dead-end job, that you only have one position available to you. And that has helped us a lot. But it's also a position that we have, it does end up with a revolving door sometimes, and we have our own issues with people who do a no-show, no-call for interviews, or, work 2 days and just decide that standing outside is not for them. It happens.
Yeah.
Frank?
Commissioner, you're going to hear from Human Resources when they do their presentation. For every department that has
Been really affected by a lot of the transition, which I understand it's needed. But what it's resulted in is a lot of dumping. And so that, combined with now charging for commercial dumping at the landfills, it's causing a lot of dumping in my district. And it's actually causing, we've had 2 instances of people reporting to my office of people actually digging holes on their property and allowing these businesses to come to their property and dump on their properties, which of course I went through code enforcement and, did all that, but it's causing a real problem. So I don't know if we could talk about any kind of resolution to that or any other kind of ideas. Because yes, we're gaining more revenue, but we're causing another problem. So
No, I understand, Commissioner. And as I said, it's tough because when we do the numbers, because of the the disposal assessments basically being stagnant for 30 years, it's really tough, and we can't immediately, you're going to immediately put a burden on the citizens if we go ahead and we say, okay, we're going to triple these so that we can make up for our rising costs. If we did that, we might be able to go back and say, yes, now people can dump for free. But when we just do the numbers itself, there is no way that right now a $69 residential disposal assessment is going to be able to pay for, hundreds of tons of vegetation, as well as what's picked up by the collector, as well as if they happen to decide to redo their entire house and they raise the house and they dispose of the entire home. It's just for $69 in a year, it just does not pay for the amount of money it costs us to process the vegetation, to run the equipment, to pay the employees to dispose of it, and to make sure that we're doing all that in compliance with the state and federal regulations.
And so my last kind of block of questions is about the waste management contract. And so I just wanted to kind of throw these things out. Yard waste, one of the major complaints that I've gotten in my district is that, especially with the elderly, when they have to wait so long for yard waste to get picked up, it blows all over the street, and then they have more problems, and it's really tough for them. Oversized items, them being left out again for so long, it just causes more issues. I've been working really hard to try to get the word out that people have to call, that they have to call Waste Management. So that's getting a little bit better. But also the garbage coming out of the tops of the garbage trucks, especially on the 524 to Adamson, that area is really, really bad. And I've talked to Waste Management about this, but I don't know. I'm just throwing out some things since we talked about the contract. And then we already talked about that. So yeah, those are some of the things with the contract that I think that I'm hoping that we can negotiate with them.
Oh, most definitely, and that's why I want to get this RFP out so that you guys can all look at it, plus the draft contract, so that we can all agree on what new provisions should be added in there. And just for your information, the last meeting that we had, because I meet monthly with Waste Management as well, so we go over their performance and liquidated damages, they were mentioning about, at least with vegetative waste, going away from the calling in for a clam truck and starting clam truck routes.
Oh, good.
So that way, because, it's not just up in the north area, you've got South A1A, you've got Tropical Trail. These are all areas that end up having large amounts of vegetative debris in large piles that people fail to call in, or they do call in, and then, you got one person gets their pile picked up when the other, I did it. So, one person gets their pile picked up and the other 10 are left behind because they didn't call in. So we are working on things like that might actually be able to happen even before this contract expires.
And the other thing that I forgot to write down, one of the things that I've been asking my staff to do is every time my office gets a email or a phone call about our trash not getting picked up, I've been having them document it. And then not only that, but we've been sending it to you guys and Waste Management. That way there's some documentation, so when we come back to the table with them, we can say,
Oh yeah, and
what's up with this?
And again, we can provide you with as much information as you need as to how many contacts came to our office ourselves, how many contacts came to Waste Management, how many of those were actual legitimate complaints that resulted in liquidated damages against the contract.
Awesome.
So any information that you'd like to see on that, I think I've at least been tracking it since we started the reimbursement program, but I know we go a little farther back than that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Tom? Frank, you want to say something?
That report is done on a monthly basis.
Yes.
And it's consistent with what the board set up, which was once a complaint is outside the contract period, there's a liquidated damage that a member of the public can receive. And so we have that going back for what, I think it's over 2 or 3 years now.
Now, I believe it was August of 2021, I believe, actually.
Yeah, so we got all that information up to the
And
current.
that's- So what that does
Right.
is the residents who call us, part of the liquidated damages that we take off of the invoice that we're paying to Waste Management, that will go back to the resident, depending upon whether they used the phone or they did it over the internet, until such a time as we've given them a 100% refund on their collection assessment. And we've never had anyone get a 100% refund on their collection assessment, so it's individually, it does sometimes look bad, but on the overall, it actually is not as bad as it was during COVID. That was really the worst period of time, and that was because there were no, there were no drivers, there were no workers, and a lot of people were, when you get sick, back then you had to be gone for 2 weeks, so you get a whole workforce that's ill and no one can collect the waste. It was just a very difficult time, but I think we did what we could for the residents.
Other questions for Tom? I just say a couple of things. I like the amnesty days or periods when people can drop off a tire and some of those other things. I think that helps. There should probably be couch amnesty in Brevard County.
Well, for the tires, the kudos goes to Joe in Mosquito Control for that one.
Yeah.
We just helped.
Yeah, but I think those things are good. I was thinking about something you said about the large items being picked up. Over the years, I've had a grill or something that I was throwing out, and I've put on Craigslist, free scrap metal. And capitalism is amazing because somebody will show up in 2 hours, and I've helped some guys, put those things in a truck, and I'm like, what are you going to do with that? I said, I'll clean that up and I'll sell it. The other thing, I'm going to take to trademark, and so there's other ways to get rid of things if you use other resources out there. So anyways, I think you guys do a good job. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
All right, next we're Eddie, also known as Tom. I don't think your mic's on, Eddie.
Let me try that again.
There you go.
Good afternoon. And I'll give you a brief overview of utility services, what we do, and then we'll dive into the weeds on funding projects and all that good stuff. So with regard to our utilities, we have 6 service areas. None of the service areas are connected. So from our operational side, we have a north service area. This is referred to as Merritt Island, Port St. John, and North Brevard. At this service area, this is where we do water and MIMS, we do wastewater and MIMS, we do wastewater in Port St. John and in Sykes Creek, along with reuse in limited areas in Merritt Island and Port St. John. Central service area, this is the area that we know as Vieira, Suntree, Palm Shores. This is where we do sewer and reclaim. We do not do water. This is where COCO provides the water for this service area. But we do have a 12 MGD wastewater plant, which is our largest. And south service area, and this is what we refer to as beaches. So our wastewater system on the beaches is everything from Penita south, and then we do water and sewer in Barefoot Bay, and then there's a small nook, San Sebastian, that we provide water that also falls under our jurisdiction. In terms of our assets, to get an overview of what these 6 service areas are that I was referencing, If you add up in terms of miles of reclaim, gravity, water main, force main, you're about at 1,100 miles. You know, if you Google on a map, I think it takes you either to Rhode Island or Connecticut, to give you an idea. Lift stations, we have 320 lift stations that are under our jurisdiction. There are other lift stations that are private lift stations, but the 321, if I were to check today, it would probably be even a bigger number on the rate of growth within our service area. And, you know, time flies, but, you know, the creation of Brevard County Utilities, I believe, was 1965, and a lot of that started with the incorporation of the South Brevard area. So, you know, when you consider the age of our assets, we're going back mid-60s for sure, but we're also taking over assets that were even going into the early 50s. So it kind of gives you an idea of the 0 to 70 range of what we're working with. So how do we take all these assets? How do we stay on top of it? How do we provide reliability? And one of the things that we do is we have a very heavy assessment program in a variety of all our assets. Over the last 5 years, we have done gravity sewer assessments, which is 530 miles. There's a technology called the Smart Ball, where you basically shove almost like a bocce ball in a force main with a cushion, and it gives you detection readings of leaks and gas pockets. We can do that on our large. It's more cumbersome, but we're still committed. We've done 7 miles. We've assessed all our lift stations. We've assessed 8 of our 9 treatment plants. Air relief valves. Air relief valves are the component to the functionality of force main lines, and you have to remember, in Florida, we rely on force main over gravity because we can only go so deep with our pipes. An air relief valve is really the opportunity for the gases in a force main to burp itself of its gases, so it gives us more capacity. Annually, we check them all. Manholes, we've assessed over 11,000 of our manholes, and all of our valves, whether it's on a water main, a reclaim, a force main, there's about over 3,500, and all of those every year get assessed to make sure of their functionality. Those that don't, we end up programming those in our operations and maintenance projects in order to get them on a schedule and within the year or 2 of getting those back to functional. So enterprise fund, that's what a utility is. In a nutshell, we do not get any ad valorem revenue. Our revenue is derived from all the rates and fees that are within our rate resolution as approved by the board. So this is an overview of 2024. This is our revenue. As you can see permit fees, special assessments, that's the bulk of it. Charges for service. It gives us an overview of how we're getting our money in. But we also spend money, and this kind of gives you an overview. And part of that is you'll see debt service expenditure, and that's going to be discussed upon later in this presentation, because when we get into larger projects, we don't generate enough money to pay as you go. Once we get into $30, $50, $80 million, we don't have the generation of revenue within a year in order to pay for those projects, so then we rely on debt service. So we talk about the county, and as you know, if we go back to the slide about South Service area, within the nook of our utility system, we have Barefoot Bay. The reason why we point that out, because the Barefoot Bay is a dependent district. So they fall under the jurisdiction, operationally under our department. administratively or from board, the Board of County Commissioners are the governing board of the water sewer district of Barefoot Bay. There is no intermediate board other than you. But again, because it's a dependent district, they are not eligible to the fees and revenue that we get from outside of our other service areas. So they have their own accounting system, and thus that's why we show it separately. And this gives you an indication of the expenditures. So, you know, you're seeing smaller numbers, but if you're familiar with the geography of the Barefoot Bay area, it's not a large area.
Is that Miko too?
Is that Miko? Barefoot Bay, yeah, Miko goes, yes.
No, I mean, serviced by that same area.
Miko
Parts of it?
Road, yes.
Okay. All right.
On the east side, until it turns into Palm Bay. This is a snapshot of our balance forward. So this is the money that we've had to roll over from year to year. So to give you a little idea of what you're seeing is the 54 million is seen as, you know, why didn't you get that done? Well, there's a good explanation. When ARPA was coming around and the money was coming in from ARPA, and we'll show this in a subsequent slide, you know, we received as a department, I believe, $65 million. And if you're familiar, there was a requirement, a federal requirement, in order to get those projects encumbered by December of last year, which included engineering and everything in order to get those out to bid. So in order not to capture, not to lose that opportunity of what we consider free money, because it's money outside of what rates are generated, we put those as a precedence. We also received FDEP grants, and that's always hit or miss, because every year, whether it's 2 or 3 times a year, there'll be portholes with, and a portal is the website for application. We've had, you put in a lot of projects, sometimes you get a lot, sometimes you don't get any, sometimes you get a few. So in the onset of this, we were quite successful, I would say, in 22, 23 with that. So thus, we put a precedence to make sure we were showing a draw on that money to Tallahassee and not giving them an opportunity to take that away. So when we talk about utilities, and this isn't Brevard, I would say this was for all of Florida, there's a lot of times you'll hear the phrase, you should. You should do this, you should do that. With utilities being water and wastewater, everything we do is governed by DEP or EPA. So that's, when they turn that into a law, it's you have to. And so a brief overview of some of the major laws, and I'll say a lot of this really started kicking in 2020, 2021, where you could start seeing the inkling, and it's grown ever since. And even currently, whenever I see House bills in Tallahassee of what they're proposing, they're not done yet on how to improve on the infrastructure, especially on the wastewater side, as we're dealing with nutrients and nutrient reduction. Brief overview, the first one, that's federal, that's through the EPA, and that's really about the PFAS reduction. That's where you're getting into the superficial wells, the recording, the assessment of the wells and assuring that they're not tripping the 4 parts per trillion in PFAS. If they are, then thus we're getting into a project, and you'll hear about that of what we're doing in South Brevard and North Brevard at the water plant. Zero discharge by 2032. Basically, the state of Florida has said, regardless of what your explanation is for having a discharge, whether the power went out, a truck backed into it, or a hurricane, regardless, if there's any discharge into a protected body, then obviously you're going to get a consent order, and this is where it's going to escalate come 2032. The other component of that is where you're getting into deep injection wells. Deep injection wells are the primary way of how we deal with treated wastewater. It's a well 2,000 to 3,000 feet in the ground for the discharge. every 5 years, the DEP requires, it's a sophisticated test that takes about 5 days, but for 5 days, you have to shut down the well. And typically, they'll let you shut down, they'll put a clause in your permit that says, only for that period of time can you discharge to an open body of water, in order for the benefit of doing the test. Come 2032, those come out. Thus, that means every facility that we have a single well now will require a second well because of this law. So, nutrient reduction in BMAPs. This is now a big drive with what's going on in Florida.
Why don't you tell them also what the cost of one of those wells is?
Yeah, I'll get to that, but so, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been active in Florida for 20 years. I would tell you, if you asked me 8 years ago what the cost of a well was, rule of thumb was $6 to $8 million. Today, with engineering, you're literally getting into like $25 million and plus. And it's only going to go up because of the law that we mentioned and the deadline of 2023. So if you can envision, every utility across Florida has to do this, not Brevard County. And there's only, I say 3, but I believe there's only one good one that does this. And so they're at the ability, God bless them, because if you want an opportunity to make money, go into deep injection wells, because they don't have price competition, but it has to get done. And Melbourne, I know, just went through this where they put that out to bid and it was up significantly from what they anticipated. 403086, this is where, as you're going to hear me talk more about this, advanced wastewater treatment. This is the buzzword. This is the requirement of treatment that the DEP now expects from treatment plants that are in BMAP areas. So, this is, as we're dealing with our treatment plants, and we have several, and I'll go into it, whenever you hear AWT, this is the requirement the DEP has specified. And then there's Florida Administrative Code. So in addition to federal law, state law, we also have Florida Administrative Code. And there is clauses in there that are justification where we have to provide uninterrupted wastewater, which falls into the zero discharge. So to give you a glimmer of what these major projects, and this is only, part of it, and this is the effort that our department is doing. So first of all, on septic to sewer, we're managing 17 projects doing septic to sewer. Bulk of those, I would say, are in Merritt Island, and there's some over in the beaches. I believe over down south of Old Galley, there's a few. But in terms of quantity and cost of what we're managing, it kind of gives you a perspective. Combine that, the initiatives we have going on, South Brevard, we're doing a new wastewater plant. This is driven because of the PFAS rule, because they were tripping the PFAS requirement. We're now going to RO. The wastewater plant, being in a BMAP, has to be AWT. MIMS water expansion, again, it's the same story about the PFAS. Their wells are tripping the 4 parts per trillion. The technology to remove PFAS is RO, which, is reverse osmosis. The component when you do reverse osmosis, as we were touching about deep injection wells, the only means of disposal, because you have a brine that's generated from the salt water, is a deep injection well. So you don't just build one, as I stated, because of the zero discharge. So you have to have a redundancy so one can get tested while the other's online. So it gives you an idea of where the 107, 150 million are coming from. South Beaches, this is our wastewater plant in Melbourne Beach, 50 million. South Patrick, force main improvement. This one, which is 38, but we were fortunate to get an FDEP grant for $14 million that will help offset that. And, you know, I don't mean to bore you by going through it, but this is just a portion of the projects to give you a magnitude of what our staff are currently managing. In addition to this, we also have other initiatives. We have Port St. John. Reason for Port St. John is that it's not in the BMAP yet, but it's going to be. So, first of all, that's our oldest plant, okay? Second, it's almost at capacity. It's not AWT, so if it were in the BMAP, it would definitely fail the BMAP nutrient requirement. And in addition, what Florida is doing with these BMAPs, and again, in some of the ruling in the basin plans, I haven't seen it here, but I've seen it over in central and west part of Florida. They're creating laws. Those laws are now saying, okay, now that we have a BMAP, here's the deal. Any new development cannot have septic systems. Any old septic existing can't get a renewal for the septic. So it puts an onus on the utilities, one, not only about the growth and being able to accommodate it, but to the existing customer or a constituent that has had a long-time septic tank that needs to do a replacement, he won't be able to because of that law. So, and as you know, we talked about this in December. I think it was December or January, I forgot. But we're still waiting on what's going on with Space Florida and about them tying in. But you know, that's going to definitely continue. And in addition, we're currently in the negotiating phase with the engineer on the Phase 2 study specifically associated with this effort. Capital improvement projects. So we've done, going through 2034, some of the numbers might be slid because of our execution of these projects, but currently right now over a 10-year span, we're looking at close to $700 million. As these reports, as this due diligence keeps coming in that the state requires us to do, and we're still doing this, we do anticipate this number to grow, and obviously the cost of inflation and any delays cannot be a cause for growth or for increase. So earlier we talked about we're an enterprise fund, user fees. The good news is that over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, this department, with the cooperation of, the county management office, that we have looked at these and trying to get a plan in place to kind of get the rates current. And one of the things that we saw is the rates were stuck or they weren't reflective. So this gives you a snapshot of what was approved in 2021, or 2022, excuse me. It gives you an implementation of how we of what it is. And in addition to it, we've also put an emphasis is let's not just stop after a 4-year jump. Trying to keep the cost current is to add a cost index to it so that we don't come to the board 15 years from now or 10 and ask for a 20% to kind of keep it up to speed. Barefoot Bay. Now, Barefoot Bay, as we talked about, it's a smaller area. And as you can see, their rates are higher. Again, that's driven because they're a dependent district and thus aren't able to capture or be a part of the countywide financial model of our department to do projects, so we have to raise their rates significantly more. This gives you an overview of the revenue versus the expenditure. And in first glance, you'll see, it looks like we're doing pretty good. But as you look in subsequent years, 27, 28, 29, this is where we're going to be starting to pursue debt service to get bonds to do these major projects that we talked about earlier. The hatched area right now, that is a range of what we're anticipating for that debt service payment. So we talk about, but we'll talk about how we can get there. One of the other changes, we talked about the user rates. Well, we also updated the consumer price index. Previously, historically, the county was, the department was using a general consumer price index. Well, if you go into the consumer price index, they actually have a long menu of different types of consumer price index. And there is one specific to sewer and water maintenance index. We thought that was more appropriate for our department, thus we've made that change through board approval. Project developer fees. So, that was another one. We looked at what fees we were charging the developers for the services that we provided, and it was not a lot. But what we noticed is, when was this? I think it was October of last year, we went to the board, seeked approval to get it up to standard of what the rest of the departments in the county are using. So we're anticipating, a greater increase in revenue from that. In addition to the services of water and wastewater, as we talked about, Brevard County has the only publicly operated fats, oil, and grease septic facility. And that is becoming an interesting story across Florida, because as growth is occurring in the county and regionally, more restaurants are coming in. As people are coming, more restaurants are coming in, which is a generator of fats, oils, grease. Homes that are being built that aren't on sewer, but they're on septic, when they get pumped out, it's got to go somewhere. And it used to be where if we didn't have the capacity by FDEP, the hauler would seek permission to go to another county, Osceola, Orange, in order to do that. The issue is all of these counties are experiencing so much growth that they're now starting to restrict out-of-county transport because they're saving that capacity for their constituents within their county. So we're currently looking at alternatives, and I actually was going to show you this. This is where we talk about it. The rates were established, and our rate resolution associated with this is in 2208, but we didn't update them because we knew we were going to do something bigger and better. Right now we have a capacity issue. We're currently looking at that to come to a long-term solution. The benefit of it is the fats, oils, grease, septic are their own separate rates. So the question is, are ratepayers paying for this? The answer is, if we establish the rates at the appropriate level based on the infrastructure, the answer should be no. So we have connection fees. I hear a question, what's the difference between an impact fee and a connection fee? Because sometimes they're the same, but they're not. A connection fee is similar to an impact fee. It can only be used on the expansion of capacity. Excuse me. So what does that mean? If you're building a wastewater plant and it's at 1 million gallons and you want to go to 2 million gallons, well, the 1 million gallon replacement is a replacement of the existing. To go from 1 to 2 is an expansion. That's where connection fees come in. When you deal with a pipe, even if you do a pipe replacement, if you're going from a 12-inch to a 20-inch, the replacement cost of the 12-inch is not through connection fees, but from 12 to 20 can be used on the connection fees. And it's important because if we spend our money correctly and maximize our application of connection fees on projects, it takes less of a burden on the user rates that are being generated. So again, connection fees are a one-time charge on water and wastewater connections to the system. This is basically making sure that these people who are putting a burden on our system are paying a fair share to gain a portion of the capacity of our pipes and treatment plants. It helps us with the growth, and we need that. And it goes toward, like I said, toward water, sewer, facilities. But the benefit of it, what I was tying it into is what differentiates. Well, under the impact fee laws, there's parameters in there on the frequency, the percentage that can be applied in an impact fee. But under the provision, under subsection 12 of that, it literally says does not apply to water and wastewater connection fees. So it gives us some latitude on how to implement that. So that's our current rates, and we've done research, and we found that this goes back to 1993, and there hasn't been an index. So when you consider what does that mean, and Jill, I know we mentioned you, but I took the graph that budget had, which I believe ended at 2013, and I expanded that construction cost index all the way back to 1993. If you take the accumulation of that, that's an increase of 167% from 93 to present, to put that into perspective. And in doing that, we currently have a connection fee study underway, and we're optimistic to get this to the board for consideration for adjustments to those fees. So again, we talk about why do we need to do it, and it's a little bit, costs are going up. There's a multitude of reasons, and God knows Florida is popular with a lot of people. But we're talking about the fair share. So if we don't set the connection fee, anything we need to subsidize will subsequently come from the user rates. And so trying to do it in a fair approach, we want new connections to pay the fee of the current moment, and thus that'll give us less burden on what the user rates. And it puts us in a position for long-term planning, so we don't get into these situations of we're near capacity, but to be ahead of the curve and to give us that ability to make those decisions. Brief overview of our department to give you in terms of quantity of projects. Current projects in our workload right now, we have 25 design projects. We have 17 that are SORL. So that's in addition to the 25. We have over 20 studies and evaluations currently being done. From that, I'm referring to as a report or a study. 8 projects that are near to or are out to bid for construction, and we have currently 20 projects in construction. So as we talk about connection fees, user rates, fats, oils, grease, and septage fees. But I'm proud of the success this department has had in seeking alternative sources. We've received 6 FDEP grants since 2022, $33 million. Again, when ARPA came around and we were submitting projects, 25 projects at $67 million. And recently with that Phase 2 study with regard to the Space Florida initiative, receiving $750,000. I wish it was million. All right. So how do we pay for this? So, first off, we do have bonds. We do have a county bond that was issued in 2014. This was in order to do some repairs and also some funding of the South Central wastewater plant. Gives you an overview. And then we have Barefoot Bay. Barefoot Bay, God willing, in 2029, they will be debt-free at that point. And this goes back to the acquisition of Barefoot Bay of 2002. This gives you an overview of what our debt service is today. This is actual, so this doesn't include what we project as future debt service, but we're anticipating this number in order to do funding of debt service being realistically within 10, 12, possibly even more million per year in order to do what we got to do. So as we go through all of this, I always like to throw this in because I would like to give you a heads up of what's coming. You know, like I said, we're currently doing a water wastewater connection fee study. We'll be bringing that to the board for your consideration for making those adjustments. We'll be talking about the investment of a new fats, oils, grease facility. Do we want to do it? If yes, what would be the adoption of new rates in order to make it where we're not utilizing user rates? And then, obviously, in order to do these capital improvement projects, you know, the adoption of bonds that we're going to need in order to do that. So,
Questions for Eddie?
I have one.
Go ahead, Commissioner Angelini.
Do you know about when we're going to see the results of that study?
which one?
The,
I have 20 of them.
the connection
Which
fee
one?
study.
I would think, I'm working with the rate consultant currently. I would like to say before June, but it most likely will be right after your June break, I would anticipate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Eddie? Any comments? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, we're going to take another, let's do the same thing. Let's be here at 20 of, okay? Go little, okay? All right. Melissa's in the box. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Appreciate the time today. Today, I'm going to go through a quick introduction to what we do in human resources, then get into more detail on our group health plan, our property casualty program, our talent recruitment and retention topics, and finally provide a short update on some of the technology implementation going on in HR. All right, so what do we do in HR? We have primarily 6 areas that serve all different functions and all work together. We have our personnel services, our support services, our benefits group, our risk management group, our organizational employee development manager, and our career development program and employee relations. Human resources is primarily funded through internal funding sources. Here's a slide that shows a breakdown of those funding sources. You can see almost all of our funding comes from internal funding mechanisms, primarily for our benefits, which is essentially our group health program, our risk property casualty program, and then some general fund as well. I wanted to provide a very quick overview of our personnel services and support services sections before we get into more detail on the other areas. For personnel services, they handle, working with the departments to create job requisitions, the advertising for jobs, the hiring process, the onboarding process. They manage the new employee orientation program. They handle employment compensation evaluations for the departments, and always looking to try and maintain internal equity within the organization as best we can. They work with payroll, county finance, to make sure that payroll and employment compensation is working hand in hand there. And finally, they do a lot with managing SAP and the HR modules in SAP, and a lot of reporting through that program. Moving on to support services, over the past year, we decided to combine both our finance group and our records group within the department to create support services. They primarily manage, or on the finance side, they manage our group health plan, the financial side of that, as well as our department operational budget. And on the records side of things, they help manage our personnel files, our background check processes, our system updates for employees, FMLA requests, and public records requests that come into our department. All right, moving on to benefits. Our benefits team supports employees through their entire life cycle here at the county, from onboarding to retirement. That includes benefit election for their core benefits, which are group health, dental, vision, short and long-term disability, and life insurance. They do this not only at the onboarding process when someone's hired, but also annually through the open enrollment process, which we typically do in the fall. In addition, the benefits team helps employees adjust their benefits after qualifying life events such as marriages, divorces, childbirth, et cetera. They help employees navigate through the deferred compensation program, our employee assistance program, and various other voluntary insurance products. The team supports our in-house wellness team and supports our robust wellness program. They run 2 health fairs a year as well. And finally, employees are ready, as employees get ready for retirement, the team assists employees with their FRS benefits, deferred comp, and retirement health coverage. All right. So now we're going to shift over and provide an update on our county's group health program, where we'll get into a little more detail. First of all, the group health plan is a fully self-insured program, which covers all of the medical and pharmacy claims. So what does self-insured mean? That means that the county and the participating entities fund the program through the revenues that are collected and pays for administrative fees, claims, and stop-loss coverage to protect us from large medical claims over $1 million. Our group health plan covers more than just our board employees. The charter offices and various other county agencies participate in our program. While the numbers fluctuate with new hires and separations, this gives you a snapshot of how many lives the plan currently covers. Approximately a little over 4,000 employees, about 3,300 dependents for a total of about 7,500 lives. So the group health plan is primarily funded through employer contributions from the various departments and agencies. This rate applies to all full-time active employees. Since the program began, the county built up some significant reserves in the fund, but because the county reduced the contribution, because of this, the county reduced the contribution rate in 2017 and then kept it flat for several years. But however, as reserves have declined, the employer contributions began increasing again in 2022. And you can see there that in fiscal year 23, 24, and 25, those contribution rates increased by 8%. For fiscal year 26, we are proposing a 6% increase to that rate. Keep in mind, this is the employer contribution, so this is what departments and agencies pay into the fund. It's not what the employee is paying. We are not contemplating increasing employee contributions this year. All right, so this provides a 5-year look at the actual revenue and expenses that have come into the group health plan. You can see that expenses have exceeded the revenue each year since 2020. The increases in employer contribution rates and some plan design changes over the past couple of years have helped reduce the losses, but as you can see, revenue is still not keeping up with the expenses of the plan. The last line shows that required reserves. As a self-insured program, we're required to report the financial status of the plan to the state annually, and through a calculation based on the incurred claim cost, they provide an amount that we are required to keep, and then we add the IBNR to that, so that's what you can see there as far as the required reserves. Generally, as claim costs increase, that reserve amount is going to increase as well. So this graph shows that relationship between our balance forward and our required reserves. And it's important because it's showing that those lines are starting to get closer and closer together. We need to make sure that we're keeping on top of this and trying to increase our revenues and reduce our expenses as best we can to avoid those lines intersecting. We don't want to fall below the threshold reserve requirement. All right, this graph shows our claim trend. This shows claims that were incurred through December of 2024 and were paid through February of 2025. The red line shows the combination of medical and pharmacy expenses combined, and the green line shows the revenue that has been generated into the plan. Currently, it's showing about a 4.5% claim trend. In 2024, you can see there was a period of time that those lines got pretty close, which was a good thing. However, in the last quarter of 2024 and early 2025, we've seen a lot of high-cost claims come in that have really bumped that trend up. All right. So last year, as we were going through the development process, we really focused on kind of two main themes when it came to the group health program that we're continuing. That's sustainability and simplification. With regard to sustainability, obviously, we want to make sure that we are keeping the group health plan financially sustainable moving forward. And to do that, we want to look at how can we increase revenue into the program and reduce costs. For revenue, I've already mentioned we're looking at the 6% increase in the employer premiums being proposed for this year's budget. Various other plan design changes have been implemented over the past couple of years, and we are seeing some benefit to the overall program from those changes, but obviously we still have work to do. For 2024, the plan spent approximately 92 cents of every $1 of revenue coming in, which is actually pretty good. In looking at the industry standard, you can see there that industry standard is about 85%, and the Medicare program last year was at 88%. So we're a little bit ahead of those trends. So it's showing that we're being efficient with the dollars that are going into the program. So the next significant change that we'll be looking at is really diving into our pharmacy program and figuring out how can we better or improve that and make it more cost effective, both for the plan and for our employees. Our Employee Benefit Advisory Committee met on Monday, and we had a really good discussion about all this. They do want to go ahead and go out to RFP on both pharmacy and medical, as well as do another pharmacy audit. So we did a pharmacy audit for 2023. It showed that Cigna was doing what they were supposed to do. There was a little bit of difference where they ended up paying us back, I think it was about $130,000. But it's always good for transparency purposes to really keep on top of that and make sure that they are fulfilling their obligations under the contract. So the group recommended going ahead to do that pharmacy audit in 2024, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And then, like I said, looking at those plan design changes, going out to RFP, both for pharmacy as well as the medical plan, to be implemented for January 1, 2027. With regard to simplification, we're always continuing to look for ways to keep our health plan sustainable, but also we want to find ways to keep it or simplify it for our employees. We sunsetted our prior HRA program and launched a new program called the Wellness Wallet, and it seems to be going well this year. We're continuing to focus on strong communication and education to give our employees the information that they need to make sure that they understand what their benefits are and how to kind of navigate through the care system with our health plan. We will be rolling out a new benefit enrollment system this year for open enrollment in the fall. The system is expected to be much more user-friendly than our current system, and we're really excited about it. We're currently in the kickoff stage and working through the planning with the new vendor. So in sum, we've seen some positive shifts in the group health program, but we still need to continue to work on increasing revenue, reducing costs in the upcoming year. Like I said, our focus in 2026 is to be looking at how can we restructure our pharmacy program and go out to RFP for that, as well as medical, and see what we can find to develop a good win-win for both the plan and our employees. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, before I move to property, you guys have questions?
Okay, good for you, because I was thinking that since you've kind of got several things here, Commissioner's questions, Commissioner Atkinson.
I'm going a little fast. I'm trying to get through it for you guys.
I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, sure.
So if I heard you correctly, you said that the employer contribution for 2026 would be about 6%?
That's what we're budgeting,
Okay.
or we're playing the budget around.
Which is a little bit lower than it has been the last couple of years.
Right.
And then the same thing also for the the employer, is the employee going to be paying the same or less? That's the part
Yeah,
I
there's
missed.
not going to be any change for employee contributions, only the employer. So the departments or the agencies, what they pay into the program on a per employee per month basis, that's what's going to increase, not employees.
Got it, thank you.
And that's because there's been very significant changes in co-pays and other things that employees have been paying. So we're trying to, minimize additional increases beyond that, because there were additional program changes last year that, fell on the employees and the dependents that were covered.
Got it.
And our focus is really trying to find cost savings as opposed to cost shifting. We don't want to help the program too much by shifting too much onto the employees.
What is the employee contribution right now?
I do have that info for you in case someone asked. So currently, for employee only, like if they're just using the insurance for themselves, they are paid, I think, anywhere from like 20 to, sorry, I had to increase. I don't have the actual amount, but I have this here. They're paying anywhere from I know it's about, and this is monthly, they are paying $37.80 a month for employee only. If they're family, it's ranges from $193 to $415, depending on the plan that they choose.
And so family is 2 people?
No, family can be any number of people,
but it's
both a
just-
spouse and children.
Just
There's
greater than 1 is family?
So we have a rate for employee plus spouse. We
Okay.
have a rate for employee and just a child.
Okay.
And then we have family, which would be both spouse and child, and it's whatever number of children. There is no.
Okay, I was just curious.
a
All right,
factor
thank
for
you.
that.
Commissioner Delaney.
I was wondering about the slide where you had fund balance versus required reserves.
Yep.
And you said that you guys are doing stuff to make sure that those lines don't collide.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you guys are doing?
Sure. We've implemented several design changes over the past couple of years, and that was in some part working with the copays and deductibles. Sunsetting the old HRA was definitely a cost savings for us because the old HRA, those funds were, or those credits were rolling over and creating a significant liability for the program. So now we're sunsetting that. People can still access that through 2027, but with the new program, it's use it or lose it for those credits for a year, so they're not continuously increasing. So we're doing things like that, and always trying to find those cost savings. But yeah, plan design changes.
So those are the
primarily.
2 big things,
Yeah.
basically. Okay, thank you.
Any
Any
other
other-
questions?
Yeah, any other questions on this section? Okay.
All right. Okay. So we're going to shift over to our property and casualty program. And just real quick, I wanted to just give a quick overview of our overall risk management program. Our risk management team works on identifying, assessing, and finding ways to control risk for the county. They do that through a whole combination of things with risk acceptance, avoidance, mitigation, and transfer. We do participate in what we call PIDGET, or the Preferred Governmental Insurance Trust. The board approved the county joining that trust in 2003. And as part of that trust, we share risk with a pool of similarly situated governmental entities. And the county utilizes a third-party administrator, or what we call a TPA, to administer claims for the county. They provide claim administration, damage and liability assessments, as well as claim resolution services. Similar to the group health plan, the risk program, the property casualty program relies upon revenues coming in, and then, spending it on the expenses of the program, which include not only insurance premiums, but also claim costs are probably the most significant portion on the expense side. We do self-insure for quite a bit, and then we carry some excess coverage. In some areas, after we work with brokers to look at where we need to do that. This slide just illustrates that our insurance program, again, like the county health program, covers more than just our Board of County Commission departments. Our constitutional officers also participate in the program. The only exception to that, as you can see, is the sheriff does not participate in basically our general liability, auto liability products, and that's only, or programs, and that's because it's more cost effective for him to do that through the sheriff's trust. But workers' comp and property, he does participate with us as well. All right, so this slide provides an overview of the revenue and expenses for the property casualty program for fiscal year ~24. The total revenue into the program was a little over $13 million. Our claim cost was $8,761,000. Our premium expense was $6,293,657. Other expenses were a little under $2 million, and you can see it was a rough year for the program. It had a deficit at the end of the year of about $3.7 million. The current risk fund balance moving forward into fiscal year '25 was $6.2 million. And obviously, in order to generate some revenue, so we can continue to work on catching up to expenses, we are proposing some rate increases for workers' comp, property, auto, and general liability. And again, these are the rates that go out to the departments and the agencies that participate. They're all, for example, workers' comp is based on position codes and salary. Property is obviously based on the property assigned to that department, and auto in general as well. With the assistance of our brokers, the county continuously looks on how best to protect the county. For some areas, excess insurance coverage is purchased. This shows each line of insurance that the county purchases and the premium cost for the current fiscal year. Our brokers have advised us to expect increases in the non-property lines between 8 and 15%, with an average about 12.3%. And this is assuming that there's no change in sovereign immunity, which I'm going to speak to in the next slide. For property, obviously that's a large premium there, but we're required to carry it in order to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. For property, our broker has advised us to expect a flat rate. However, our total insured value has increased, so we do expect there will be a premium increase for that. I will have the property renewal on the agenda for probably the first, either the end of April or first meeting in May for you. The property plan, or the property coverage, carries from 6/1 to May 30th of each year, whereas all the others are on the fiscal year of 10/1 to 9/30. So I had mentioned that the rates that we're expecting are assuming that there's no change in sovereign immunity. We are carefully watching House Bill 301. There is a companion bill in the Senate, but the House bill seems to be the one that's making traction through the committees. The bill as submitted, and it currently exists, at least as of this morning, it's in Judiciary Committee, and it's proposing an increase in sovereign immunity from $200,000 per person and $200,000 per claim, $300,000 per incident if there's multiple claimants, and increasing that to $1 million, $3 million, which is a substantial huge increase. Yeah, it's a little scary. There's some additional changes about shortening the statute of limitations, shortening the notice period, and the ability to settle claims above the insurance limit, which will have some positive effects, certainly the statute of limitations, but the sovereign immunity limit, if it goes up that much, would be pretty significant for us. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to help you conclude this quickly.
Okay.
What you need to know, Commissioners, here's the bottom line. Health insurance is healthy, but you have to go the 6%. The property and casualty lines you should be concerned about. That 3.7 million, that's a really bad number. We only have 6 million left. That 6 million that's there has to pay all the claims for the life of those claims, and to leave it in very simple terms, which tells you that we need a very significant increase when you look at those numbers and we know what the premiums are going to be. So the unfortunate part of that, it puts extra pressure on budget development because all agencies are going to have to pay property, liability, workers' comp. The reason the sheriff's with us is because we were the cheapest. You know who's the most expensive? The sheriff. And because high-risk groups have more claims, right? And so while we're going to keep the health insurance at 6%, the rest are going to be 9 to 12, and it should probably be higher, but we're trying to figure out where can we at least not lose more ground. So having said that, I want you to jump, if you would, to the next area, because I think it's pretty self-explanatory for HR, but I did want to mention a couple of slides for you that, and I think it's around 20, let me see, was it 22?
You want the vacancy?
29.
Vacancy?
Yeah, I want to get to 29. 28, 29. How many new hires have we had this year? 362. Rehires, 304 separations, 403. So it tells you that we're losing a little bit of ground in 2024, but the number that I think you'd be interested in seeing is all the departments that had over 100 PCNs. We're giving you on page 29 the area. And you've heard from several of these departments already. Planning and Development has a 24, almost 24% vacancy rate. Parks and Rec is at 17. Fire Rescue is at 17. Fire Rescue has a lot because even at 17, they have 600 employees. So when you multiply that out, you'll see what the number is. But you can see all our big departments, I will tell you, historically, 8 to 10%, maybe 8 to 11, is usually historically, for the last 25, 30 years, where our vacancy rate has been. It's higher. This is not unique to Brevard County, but it's a very significant challenge because if it's a service where you, like utilities or solid waste, where they need to have the people there, well, if you got too many vacancies or, you don't have the road crew out doing what it needs to do in public works, it's overtime, right? And fire rescue, you've heard that repeatedly, that. So it is a, significant issue across the organization. There are a variety of initiatives ongoing, recruitment, hiring for different departments, public works, fire rescue. They have their own recruitment staff now because they have to do something to do outreach beyond what they've been doing. Those initiatives are ongoing, as well as to develop people from within the organization or give them other opportunities, like you heard from Tom. So they are all explained here, but quite honestly, to put it simply, at the rate we're going with these budget hearings, I will be long retired and you'll still be having budget hearings, and that's not going to work for you. I need to regroup with them to kind of condense things. So we're trying doing it here for human resources. I think it's all there for you. I want you to get through more, and if the board's good with setting up an additional workshop, we will try to get everybody else, give you the information that will help you give us direction, maybe, at the, at the end of the next workshop. We'll try to get everybody else done in that kind of time frame. But I think those are the essential points.
Yeah,
I don't mean to cut
absolutely.
you off. I'm
No.
just trying to
I thought
help
at
you.
the end of today, maybe we would pick a date, maybe we'd have
Yeah,
a
that would
group
be good.
discussion and because I think we're going to have another workshop
Right.
just like this today.
Yeah.
And maybe we could squeeze in a couple of the smaller departments, like I said, so
Right.
whatever we could do.
We'll
So-
try to get everybody in at the next one as best we can to give you just the essential information you
Okay.
need to have. So with that, if you're good, we'll move on, and I know public safety is going to make this very short from their perspective, and then we'll try to get to soil for you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Matthew Wallace. I'm the Director of the Public Safety Group for Brevard County. Thank you for a little bit of your time this afternoon so we can talk about public safety and obviously a subject that's near and dear to my heart. This is our public safety group in a nutshell overview of what we are, and it truly is an honor to lead the 800-plus men and women of the group, and I do consider them some of Brevard County's greatest heroes. They run to fires. They go to work when hurricanes coming in, which is not natural. They show up on the scene of a fatality, and they're the first ones that do investigative work and contact the family usually to let them know that something bad has happened to their family. And our crossing guards are the ones that jump out in the middle of a street, and all they have is a plastic sign to get the traffic to try to stop. So if that's not hero of capabilities and characteristics, then I'm not really sure what is. So even though I am the direct supervisor of the Fire Chief Pat Voltaire and the Director of Emergency Management John Scott, I'm also dual-hatted as the Director of Record for the Public Safety Offices. And that consists of the Medical Examiner's Office, Community Corrections, and School Crossing Guards. Each one of those is led by a program manager, and those three individuals are some of Brevard's most fantastic folks. They're absolutely awesome. The mission of the medical examiner, I'll go through the missions real quick of the little three is what we call them. The medical examiner is there to determine cause and manner of death when a fatality happens. They're also there to coordinate with families to ensure that we have dignified transfer of the body, and also to work with law enforcement and the judicial operations if those cases so deem that we're going to have to go to court. For community corrections, those folks work in the jails in some of Brevard's toughest populations, and they're there to do post-trial and pre-trial supervision. They're there for the probate folks, and they're also there for the folks that we can release pre-trial. They also facilitate the Public Safety Coordinating Council, which brings together law enforcement, judicial, and the support services across the community to support those populations that are Sheriff Ivey's clients. And finally, the school crossing guards, pretty self-explanatory. They cross all of Brevard County's unincorporated children who cross in unincorporated areas at the designated locations throughout the county. So if we go quickly, as with everything in public safety, we are under some pretty intense regulatory guidance. Florida statutes govern the medical examiner's office, establish medical districts, and also provide a list of cases that must have autopsies. Community corrections, we're guided that we must have counties must have a public safety coordinating council, and we also must provide supervision to those pre- and post-trial candidates or clients that we have to make sure that they're properly accounted for. And in school crossing guards, directs local communities that have those school crossing guard programs. There's strict guidance from the Florida Department of Transportation that we must train and make sure that all those crossings are done in a completely safe manner. If you look at our staffing in the public safety offices in these little three, if we're fully staffed, we have about 99 folks. We do a lot of emphasis in recruiting from our crossing guards. It's a senior population. They come and go a lot, but we have put a lot of emphasis in to make sure that we onboard school crossing guards. And right now, knock on wood, we're pretty healthy across the county. Going into the budgets, public safety offices primarily are general fund funded. An overwhelming majority of 4.7 total, 4.6 of it being from the general fund. If we go into each individual office, the medical examiner's budget, $3.4 or so million total, with 3.3 being from the general fund. When you look at their expenses, an overwhelming majority is comp and benefits or people. They also have lab services and operating expenses, lab services, toxicology and pathology services on a case that may need to go do that. And the operating services are usually mostly the transportation of the bodies to and from the medical examiner's office. If we go into community corrections budget, they're just a little over $500,000. Again, a majority of it being from the general fund transfer. Their expenses, an overwhelming majority is the people cost for them. They do have a small amount of operating services. That's for them to travel to and from homes of those probates that they would have to do mandatory services and supervisions to. Going on to the school crossing guards, about $779,000 total, with the majority of it again being from the general fund. Comp and benefits is an overwhelming majority of what the expenses are for the school crossing guards. We'll get into some fast facts. What have they done? What are we doing this year? Medical examiner's office last year, in 2024, we had over 1,000 autopsies that our 3 medical forensic pathologists performed. That is in line with what Florida guidance is. It's about 335 autopsies per doc per year is what they should be doing. So we're pretty much in line for staffing from them. Community corrections, we made sure we released properly 875 pre-trial release folks who are waiting for their trial. We do this in coordination with the judges to make sure that we release the right folks. They have to apply and be vetted. We do that so we can keep the jail population under a targeted amount, which is quality of life and good living conditions for those folks that are in Sheriff Ivey's jail. And for school crossing guards, last school year we crossed over 650,000 children. That's total going to school and coming from school. We did it at 57 designated crossings across the county and supported about 25 schools. Looking forward, I wanted to give you real quick what our workload factors are, what drives our work. For the medical examiners, obviously it's the number of autopsies as our population continues to grow. From community corrections, it's the number of the inmates that we have that we can service to try to get out on pre and post trial release. And for school crossing guards, it's the number of designated crossings that we have across the county. So as the number of unincorporated schools grow and we designate those crossings, then of course that drives what our need is for crossing guards. So in a brief nutshell, that was probably about 3 minutes. Maybe boss will make him proud. But I'm here if any questions you have from the public safety offices that provide support to our citizens in Brevard.
Questions for Colonel Wallace? All right.
Thank you. And I would like to say, on our citizens' worst day, we're there. We're the ones that get called, and we're the ones that make that first contact. I'm so proud of the men and women of Public Safety Group. It's just an honor to be with them every day. So, Commission, thank you for your time. And that, I'll introduce John Scott, right there behind me, and you take it away.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about emergency management. Similar to Matt, I'm going to attempt to move with some speed. So from a mission and vision value standpoint in emergency management, we have 3 divisions who work for us. We have our EOC operations staff, we have our public safety radio system, and we have our 911 systems and administration. We work very closely on those. You heard Matt touch on it. At the end of the day, our vision is to be at our collective best when things seem their worst, and that's not just us. One of the things we benefit from is our partnerships. And it's a core principle for us. Very little of what we use during disaster response or day-to-day operations is actually ours. We leverage our partners. We leverage those existing relationships to meet the needs as we go through that. So we have a small force that we use a lot to get through, and we rely on those partnerships. Those partnerships are also a great benefit to us because we essentially become, for the county and for our community, the guy that knows a guy that knows a guy, right? So you come see us for those kinds of things, and we help get you connected. We do a lot of that through coordinating information and resources, sharing what's going on, and again, hoping at the end of the day, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're changing outcomes because we have that luxury of the 50,000-foot view as opposed to our crews who are out in the field at a very granular level. So again, that's what we try to leverage. Just so you guys can see, from an overall org chart standpoint, we have about 20 folks who work in emergency management, again, across those 3 divisions as we move forward. Budget-wise, overwhelmingly, we are special revenue and user fees funded. About 80%, 83%, 82% in that range gets us there. We talk about our 800 megahertz radio system, our public radio system, our public safety radio system. The big things I want to highlight there are it is utilized by all public safety agencies, not just fire and law enforcement, but also our friends at the health department, with Public Works. We talk about our SCAT crew, so we're all connected through one system, which allows us to leverage as resources as fast as we can, especially during times of emergencies. That's 52 different user agreements we have with agencies. We work year-round to support them, and we're also working when it comes to buildings and things like that to make sure we get good signal penetration in all of the different areas, especially as new construction continues. To highlight what that breaks down for you all, from a support standpoint, so that's our users, we have just under 6,100 radio users. We have 646 talk groups. We support 10 public safety answering points. That's 911 dispatch centers. We make sure they have the radios. We do that through 9 towers, 9 hubs. We have 210 repeaters, so it's a lot of equipment. And we take very seriously the responsibility of delivering clear, concise communication for our teams in the field. From a budget standpoint, overwhelmingly supported through our radio user fees. We do get a small amount of general fund and then a slightly larger amount of special revenue funds. I'm going to switch and keep it going and talk about our 911 systems administration. These are 2 primary components. The first piece is the support of our public safety answering points. Again, those are our dispatch centers. We provide all the technology there. Again, not the call takers, not those folks, but everything they need to handle the call that comes in. I'll show you a chart with sort of how we do that. And then we also make sure that we're providing the right addresses, right? One of the big keys to being able to dispatch help is to know where that person who needs it is. So we work very hard to make sure our location data is the same. We do the addressing assignment. We work with planning and zoning, and we even do some address assignment for some of the municipalities. Again, what does that look like in equipment? We have 2 core sites. We have those 10 public safety answering points, where that is the idea of the actual equipment we provide. We have 2 host sites, which is sort of the backbone of that system, where that technology comes from. So if you want to envision it, our host sites are sort of the hub, and then our PSAPs are the spokes in this conversation. And then in addition to that, we're providing some services for those telecommunicators, training, some funding dollars for their actual dispatch centers as well, and then a variety of other support options for the telecommunicators. Again, I highlighted that what that call system looks like. You'll see on the chart there's a lot of different steps. A call has to go from the call maker, the person experiencing the emergency, before they actually get to the dispatcher. I want to highlight here inside that green box, all of those steps have to happen within 3 seconds. So it's a lot of equipment that has to work and work well in order for the dispatcher to get the call and know where that person is. And then once they're on the line, we're constantly refreshing that location so that it changes. We're keeping up with that because, again, we want to make sure the actual services go to the person who needs them. In budget there, that's almost, I think we're at 99% is all user fee, special revenue protected funds there. That comes through a variety of different fees that we get when we talk about state dollars. Emergency management and our actual EOC operations side of the house. I'll talk a couple of things just from a hazard profile because I think it's important to note. We have a very unique hazard profile here in the county. We have 3 rivers, 72 miles of ocean, several different kinds of habitat that makes our world interesting. Since 1950, we've had 45 federally declared disasters in Brevard County. Right? That puts us 3 times the national average and in the top 10 in the state of Florida, so we stay very busy. We also have the world's largest cruise port, and we are in the 50-mile ingestion pathway for the St. Lucie nuclear power plant. What that all equates to is the chart and the numbers you see behind us. Last year, we activated 116 times. It makes us the most activated EOC in the state of Florida and one of the most activated EOCs in the country. And then you see the additional numbers that just support all of the day-to-day activities we're doing. For Milton, just to give you guys an example, I talked earlier about the team that goes behind this. This is by the numbers. You may not be able to see each individual thing, but it is a lot of work that goes into any sort of disaster response, and we were very lucky with Milton. that we experienced minimal impacts and minimal consequences from it. And this chart for Irma or Matthew looks significantly larger. And then I really want to highlight, as I continue to move through, how proud we are of our new Emergency Operations Center. Last year, we opened it on June 1st. That was the culmination of probably 25 years of community work. We got tremendous support from from Frank and his team there, from all commissions, from our state legislators, from our federal folks, and really from our community to make sure we got there. Prior to opening that, we were in a civil era defense bunker that was the second oldest EOC, and we were putting 200 to 300 people in there, so we're in a much better situation. We also share that facility with the sheriff's office and their unified communications center. So those kinds of things have been a tremendous improvement. And one of the other big things I want to highlight with this is when we opened it, we talked about a commitment to our partners and a commitment to the community. Since opening it, we have hosted 104 meetings and trainings there. So it's not just a gray skies kind of facility. It is a place we're using it all the time for all of our partners so that we're all benefiting from that additional space and that increase in technology. I'll talk about emergency operations specifically. Primarily, we're governed by two things, which is Florida Statute 252, and then Brevard County has an emergency management ordinance. Those details are up there and they're in your slides. I'll just point out, we were required by law to have an emergency management program with a director, with special needs shelters registries, with a comprehensive emergency management plan, with a local mitigation strategy, and then the authorities that give us there to implement all of our protective actions. And then for us locally, the ordinance itself defines roles and responsibilities and helps us sort of put guardrails as we go through. The operations side of the budget, that is the portion that gets the largest general fund. We have a small portion of user fees. We have some protected fees that we get from the state and FEMA. And then the general fund there, the table that accompanies this chart shows you just a breakdown of what those primary expenses are. About $131,000 is the required match for that federal grant we get. And then the rest of the money is pretty much in half between staff and actually operating the new facility, as it is significantly larger and more complicated than our previous facility. Outside of that, I'll take your questions.
Questions? Commissioner Altman, you had a question, sir?
Well, I know, talking of the color money, I see you have special revenue funds covered for your hat and tie. Do you have a pair of green pants on, too?
Just a suit, sir, just a green suit.
It's a green suit?
Yes,
okay, good. Yeah, you got the color of money covered. That's good. That's helpful.
Anyone else? Questions? Nope.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we're going to move on. All right, very good. Going to power through this. Virginia?
Okay. How do I get to my?
We're,
Just scroll down. Oh, fantastic.
Virginia,
Okay.
we're gonna end at like 3 minutes to 5 so that the board can pick our next workshop date.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think we have one right now, okay? So, go ahead,
All
Virginia.
right. I am presenting on the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program only, which is one of the Natural Resources Department programs, and I'm going to skip my presentation outline. Amanda Elmore is going to talk about the other 5 programs within the Natural Resources Office. This is our color of money pie chart for the whole office. You can see that it is predominantly pink, 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 with one tiny, tiny sliver of green that is part of what Amanda will present. So diving into just the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program, we are entirely pink, special revenue fund. And over on the expense pie chart to the right, you see very little slivers for comp and benefits and operating. The rest of that purple, gray, and yellow is all going to projects. The lagoon is very important to a healthy economy. I won't take time for that. Healthy seagrass meadows are the foundation of lagoon productivity and fisheries abundance. 70% of sport fish use seagrass. Like all plants, seagrasses need sunlight to grow, so dirty, polluted water is a problem. 2016, we had a horrible fish kill. The board asked the governor for help. We were told we needed a plan, and so staff was directed, develop a plan, come up with referendum options to help fund the plan, and by August, the board had a plan, ballot language, an enabling ordinance, established a citizen oversight committee, a trust fund, and directed staff to go negotiate sales tax use and distribution agreements with cities so that all the money could go in one pot and we could work together. So just to highlight in the ballot language, the purpose of this funding was projects and programs designed to improve water quality, fish, wildlife, and marine habitat, remove muck, and reduce pollution. And the bottom line talks about with citizen committee oversight and annual independent audits. I won't go into the election results, but obviously it passed. The committee is made up of a whole bunch of different fields of expertise, as you know, half nominated by the cities since they allowed all of the money to go into one pot managed by the county, and then the other half by the county. The role of the oversight committee is really important for many reasons. So, how do we spend this money? We call this our 4 R's: reducing the sources of pollution, removing pollution that's already there, restoring the natural shock absorbers in the system, and responding to new information and opportunities. We needed to hit the ground running, so losing no time for analysis paralysis and more studies and whatever. So use the best available data, get going with no regrets strategies, and as we learn, adapt the plan. And that's part of why the Oversight Committee is so important, is for that annual adaptation process to provide, listen to the community and provide recommendations to the County Commission. The sources of pollution have changed dramatically, and so people have different perceptions based on when they, were paying attention to what was going on. So in the 1990s, you see point sources. Wastewater was the biggest source. That has changed dramatically by the time we were developing this plan. So some sources had been contained and reduced, and other sources had grown with more and more people moving here. And so the plan has got to be relevant to the problems of today. I'm not going to go through the 428 projects that are in the plan, but you have a handout by your seats that has this as the centerfold that shows what the projects are and where the money is going and what the progress is. And so just to illustrate how much has changed since the original plan, you see the change from the gray on the left pie chart that was mostly removing pollution that was already in the lagoon to the right-hand pie chart that's mostly yellow and orange and brown and blue. Those are projects, wastewater and stormwater projects, to stop pollution from getting to the lagoon in the first place. This is the same information but in tabular format. So you see in that far right column an increase. Almost all of the increased revenues collected since our initial projections have gone to wastewater projects and stormwater projects. So this graph shows you the different scales of pollution sources. So you can see that, from these wide bars, muck flux, stormwater, air pollution, and septic are the largest sources. And I've overlaid on that our pink revenue. So the revenue roughly follows the contours of the sources, with the exception of septic systems that receive emphasis due to a lot of public and policy issues. Our program, like all the other directors, we've had to deal with inflation, and it's been a wild ride that we did not anticipate back in 2016. This is how it's affected our revenues year after year. See, 2020, our revenues went down, but then, major recovery in 21, 22. We're pretty stable now and hoping that continues through the end of the 10-year tax. And you can see overall, comparing our projections to our actuals, we've done pretty well. In fact, for 2024 calendar year, we collected 99.8% of our projected revenue. On the construction side, we've also got inflation issues, and so the 2025, this shows the difference between what was in the 24 plan versus what's actually happening out there in the world, and so the 25 plan went back and adjusted inflation on all of the projects to help address that issue. This shows you the significant growth in homeowner projects completed in the last couple years, and I was going to tell you why, but we'll skip that. Anyway, it's a bunch. These are repairing people's broken sewer pipes, connecting them to adjacent sewer lines, and upgrading septic. You see this similar to the homeowner projects, this crescendo in the big capital projects. This is without the cities, and this is with the cities. Both the county and the cities have struggled a little bit in the last year with inflation exceeding our budgets and having to reject bids and delay getting projects under construction. We have tried to make up a lot of the delta by leveraging grants, and so you see how our success with grants has changed significantly over the years, and I've added some extra bits on that last. So since the 2025 budget was adopted, we've received $5.8 million in legislative appropriations last session, and then just Tuesday, the governor announced $19 million in state grants awarded from the Indian River Lagoon Protection Fund. And we have increased the number of FTEs managing grants to keep up with the workload. It takes money to make money, so because we have the swirl tax that we are collecting from our citizens, we're also collecting about 1/5 of that from tourists. We're using that to leverage grant dollars. We're also using that to get more funding from our partners. So for every dollar paid by a local at the checkout counter, they're getting about $2.50 worth of project delivery. This is a list of the appropriations from last year versus this year's list. The ones that are lined through were vetoed by the governor. So we'll see how we do this year, but we appreciate whatever we can get. We've completed 101 projects. About 46 of those were, exactly 46 of those were done by cities. Collaboration with the cities is really important to addressing hotspots in our community. That's where pollution tends to be most concentrated entering the lagoon, and so we really, need to work with the cities to address those problems. Let me just skip to the middle columns where it says spent plus in progress. So you can see that between what we've spent to date plus the projects that are in progress, either in design, in construction, in permitting, those total $411 million. We've collected $434 million. So we are trying to keep up with collections and push projects forward at pace with the collections. So are we picking the right projects? We put in 45 groundwater wells up and down the county to determine this. And so the green shows what are the pollution levels in natural areas in our conservation lands, whereas the red bar shows what are the pollution levels in the groundwater at homes that are on septic. The next blue bar shows what is the pollution level in homes that are on sewer service. So you see there's still increased pollution with people that are on sewer, but it's nowhere near what septic systems are like. And so we get a huge benefit when we convert people from septic to sewer. But then we take that treated sewage and we send it back to people to use for irrigation, and they're still getting the nutrients. So we have to do the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plants, the advanced wastewater treatment that Eddie Fontaine was just describing to you in his presentation. Muck removal, we're basically vacuuming out the accumulation of past pollution that collects in the low spots. And I will jump to this slide that shows, do these projects work? So the first two, the first one is the Titusville Osprey wastewater treatment plant project. So you see the brown bars are what was a pre-project pollution level. The blue, Lagoon blue bar is the clean water afterwards. So whether it's a wastewater treatment plant upgrade, a septic to sewer project, dredging reducing turbidity, or dredging reducing bloom severity, these projects work. Collectively, this is the 101 projects, have removed over 800,000 pounds of pollution from the lagoon. And so then this is bloom levels mapped from 2016 to present. And so those peaks are where we had major blooms. So the first peak at the left end is the 2016 fish kill. The next peak is 2018, which is in bloom the whole year. And then the peak in the center, the worst one, that was Thanksgiving to Christmas 2020, when we had fish kills in both the Banana and the Indian River. But then after that, you see it's been relatively calm. So right after December 2020, it calmed down. And so what that means is that these green bars are seagrass, hectares of seagrass in the lagoon. So you see seagrass was expanding up until 2010, and then the 2011 super bloom, you see that first decline, and then 2016, you see the next decline, 2020, you see the last decline, but since 2020, we have progressively been expanding seagrass. So we have a long way to go, but recovery is clearly possible if we keep doing what works. And I was going to tell you all about the challenges of septic, but I'm going to skip that and go to questions.
Okay, commissioners, commissioners, questions?
I have one.
Questions? Go ahead.
Do we have test wells near any of the wastewater treatment plants, not just by the homes that have sewers?
We have test wells at the homes that are close enough to the wastewater treatment plants that they are receiving reclaimed water for irrigation.
Okay.
But
So
not-
sort of.
But not at the wastewater treatment plants.
Right.
We do sample, we download the reports that the wastewater treatment plants have to submit to the state, and we track that. We also pour water samples out, directly out of people's sprinkler systems, and send that water to the lab so that we know what's reaching the homes, not what's coming out of the wastewater treatment plant.
And what about the city's wastewater treatment plants? We have them near there?
So we do a representative subsample. We don't monitor every single project. We don't want to spend that much money on monitoring.
Do you know which ones we do have it by?
The Titusville is one of them.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioners, other questions?
And Palm Bay. It's another city.
Any comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It seems unrealistic that we're going to get through the next one here, Frank. I think that's, well, okay, right before we call it quits, let's pick the date for the next meeting, okay? Next budget workshop, open the suggestions here. We could do Wednesday, April 9th. We could do Thursday, April 10th. After that, I looked at Tuesday, April 15th, or Wednesday, the 16th. I understand on April the 10th, there's TPO, but, I mean, quite candidly, we could probably skip that to come here to do a budget workshop if it works for the staff. So, commissioners,
I have the,
I was thinking about dying on that day.
if you'll hang in a little longer, okay.
I think I can make it.
All right. I'm sure your insurance annuity will be better by then anyway.
I have the CFX board that day.
Which day?
The 10th,
Okay.
that morning.
So in
Would
the
the
morning?
15th be possible?
Okay. 15th? Tax day?
What day?
15th, Tuesday, April 15th?
That's income tax day. No, I'm going to be running that day. That's federal tax day. I don't know.
Okay.
That's bad.
Hold on 1 second.
Or the 14th?
The 15th, I think I have a meeting at 11 that I can't move. So it'd have to be the afternoon of the 15th for me.
What day?
We're talking about Tuesday, April 15th in the afternoon. I think we all have to move some things. Okay, 15th?
Yeah.
We're going to agree on that in the afternoon.
Thank
So
you.
we'll do a 1 to 5 again on April 15th. Okay, Don, we don't have any cards, is that right? So we had cards, but I think they gave up. Okay. Okay, real quick, let's go around. Mr. County Manager, board report.
No report.
Mr. County Attorney.
No reports.
Okay. Commissioner Delaney.
No report.
Commissioner Goodson.
No.
Commissioner Atkinson.
Yes. Just two very quick things. First of all, I took the board's direction and reached out to the property appraiser and the tax collector at our last meeting in March, on March 11th, to request the information on whether our partners in space, what kind of taxes they're paying. So I sent that request on the 12th of March. I didn't hear anything in a week, so I checked with them. I have yet to hear. So eventually I will, and when I do, I'll bring that information back to the board and the residents that I have that are questioning that. And secondly, thank you to Billy and all of his staff for all the work you guys have done on the Barrier Island Protection Act. I know that it's been a lot, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Altman, sir. Okay, I think my one thing really was picking the date for the next one because I didn't think we were going to get through this. And I believe there'll be some news maybe over the weekend from the legislature regarding the hospital. I don't have specific details, so just tell you that that's something that they continue to look at in the legislature. So, okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks to all the staff very much.
Take more than a hot dog.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.